Welcome back, everybody. I hope that you had a nourishing lunch, both for your bodies and for your minds. And welcome back to our next session. I'm very happy that we have on the podium all of our speakers. So this section is focused specifically on pathways, solutions, practical approaches to catalyze the green transition. And I'm very pleased to introduce Ms. Rania Sharsha, the director of IOM's Climate Action Team. She is based here in Geneva, and she brings more than 28 years of extensive experience, hands-on, in the design, in leading and developing large-scale programs in complex emergency and developing country contexts in the Middle East, Africa, and at global levels. Rania's experience includes extensive technical thematic focus on migration, climate change, protection, gender, child rights, disaster risk reduction, and resilience, as well as policy and advocacy for change in both the humanitarian and development spaces. Prior to that, she held leadership positions, including with IOM, as the Director of Peace and Development Coordination, as the Deputy Regional Director for International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent, Chief of the Child Protection and Gender Entity at UNICEF, and Deputy Regional Director for the MENA region at the Danish Refugee Council, as well as other leadership posts at Save the Children, CARE International, UNOPS, and USAID. Where haven't you worked, Rania? It's quite... yes, you have, quite a bit. But let me, without further ado, turn over to you to introduce our panel. Thank you, Rania.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And it's very challenging to moderate a session after lunch, but I'm sure it will not be, we will keep you actually listening and engaged, because we have an amazing distinguished panelist that we're having, we'll introduce them in a minute. As actually Michelle thankfully introduced me, my name is Rania, and I'm so happy to be part of IOM team leading such important, to all of you, agenda, which is the climate action, and actually moderating such a very important session. It came very timely after COP29, and I think that COP29 has some point of a modest achievement. I know that everyone wanted to have a higher achievement on the financial side, but we are happy. The new collective quantified goal on climate finance has a reference to migrants and refugees, which is a great achievement to see. And also, while the fund is not the fund that we expected, but at least it's a base to build upon. I'm a climate optimist, so I see the optimistic part of things. But also the global goal for adaptation, we were very happy to see migrants featured there, which is a good start. It's not the end, it's just the beginning. I'm also pleased to note that the UAE Just Transition Work Program text returns a crucial reference to migrants and internally displaced persons. This highlights the importance of engaging all relevant social partners, including workers, local communities, migrants, IDPs, women and children, and young people that we have a number of them with us today. Please allow me to now introduce our panelists that I'm so happy that they are part of this panel today, starting by Ms. Maria Cristina Cifontes, part of the consultant of the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia, and one of the leaders when it comes to just transition negotiation for Colombia, and also leading the peace approach in the NDC team at the direction of climate change and risk management. Welcome, Ms. Maria. We also have been joined by Mr. Carmelo Troccoli, the Director General, who have 2 decades of experience related to agriculture, farmers, markets, and especially how to leverage farmer markets for local food systems. So welcome to this panel. We're so happy to have you with us. And last but not least, someone I'm so proud of. Actually, Noha Saleh. Noha Saleh is COP29 IOM Youth Delegate. She's been with us there not only as a youth delegate, but she's been presenting the voice of a lot of young people on climate migration and as part of the team of IOM. has an expert on regional migration focusing on how to advance the climate action agenda through data and research efforts, technical and capacity building, as well as policy support. So thank you so much for joining us. She's also from my region. She's a North African, so I'm so proud to have her as young voice here today. And before we go and start the conversation with the panelists, I think that it will be really good to hear from Ms. Maria Cristina and from Noha on their insights and feedback after coming back from a very enjoyable but tough COP this year. Please, Ms. Maria.
Okay. Thank you so much for the kind invitation to the International Organization of Migration. It's a great honor to be here. It was very tough and challenging to come. I was until the very end, very last minute of the COP, because I couldn't leave the flag of the country without having the certainty that all our priorities were not going to fail in the last session. We had an extra journey. We were supposed to finish on the 22nd, but we finished on the 23rd. And the last night was very, very challenging because many of the advances that we have gotten in the first 2 weeks and a half of negotiations were in high risk at the very end. So we were trying to work with many countries of the region and other regions in order to rescue them and enhance more commitment for the last outcomes and results and the steps forward. In that sense, I would like to say that this COP29, as you said, was very challenging, but also very interesting in terms of getting an agreement of new quantified goal for finance. I think that one is one of the main cores and achievements for any COP. Even this one of UNFCCC or the one of biodiversity or the certification, always finance is going to be the way we could implement everything we try to advance in the other items of negotiations. In my case, as leader of negotiations of just transition for Colombia, I realized and I am aware that anything that we proposed in a decision text for the just transition track could be implemented without financial support. That's why it's crucial and definitely very important to interconnect all the agendas, and that's why our country we were cooperating and working together with the leader of negotiations of finance in order to get an approach, a joint approach, to bring just transition to the finance item of negotiations. So that means that she was suggesting that in the finance track, the new quantified goal was also focused in just transition in general. And what does it mean? That means that we are going to have financial support for everything that was negotiated in the other track, in the track that I follow. So in June, in the first 2 weeks of negotiations for the meeting of the subsidiary bodies, Colombia suggested the specific and textual inclusion of migrants and internally displaced people in the main focus of the differential approach for the implementation of the Just Transition Work Program. And that was something very innovative because it was not before June. So we proposed it, and we were finding many other parties, other countries that supported the inclusion of migrants and internally displaced people. And we explained why it is crucial and important because they are in the core of one of the most vulnerable communities and the main focus that we could and should try to approach at the local and national level. So we were also explaining the importance of considering the climate causes of the migration and also conflict and other multiple causes that could sever or exacerbate the vulnerability of these communities and, in fact, the gaps for having a just and fair transition. So what I expect for next steps after this COP, where we had very interesting discussions, is that we could continue promoting a decision to adopt maybe next year, because this year, unfortunately, we couldn't, for the Just Transition track, we couldn't get a decision. It was very difficult in terms of some specific topics, but migrants is safe. So migrants is something, is a proposal that is no one is going to touch, and that's okay, and I'm glad for that. And we are going to ensure and guarantee that no one take out of the text migrants and internally displaced people. But still, there are some other proposals in terms of content that are crucial for promoting a fair and equitable just transition that were changed in the last day, so on Saturday. We are happy as country with the version on Friday 22nd that was published in the website of UNFCCC. We only have a small suggestion for one of the paragraphs, but it's a very good advance. Nevertheless, there was another session, no formal, another text version, no formally discussed, that was edited somehow for, I don't know who, but we disagreed with that one. So we preferred to stop there and continue having a better agreement in June, better than seeing in the text that many of the good advances that we got in terms of ambition were going to be taken out of the text. So we are expecting that we continue with the last version officially published, and then looking forward and adoption of the decision and getting the financial support with the item of the new quantified goal.
Thank you so much, Maria, and definitely we'll come back at you. And yes, when you are a negotiator and you start this conversation, we can talk about it for hours. But now it will be really good to hear Noha. And I was so proud that the voice of young people in this COP was very high. They were coming there, not only presenting themselves, but their communities, and they've been part of every negotiation and discussion. I attended the session moderated even by 10 years old. I don't want to say child, I would say a genius young girl. So maybe Noha, you can give us your insight.
Thank you, Rania, and thank you, Maria, for presenting the course of the negotiation. I will not go into details. This year, as an IOM COP29 delegate, was a very different experience for me. Last year, I participated in the COP28 in Dubai, and this year has been absolutely a learning journey. To be able to negotiate on behalf of my country, I felt empowered and also privileged. So a main highlight, I would say, is having a conversation with our Minister of Environment. And I was introducing to him the position and intersection of the just transition as a negotiation track in which human mobility is a priority and can be a priority for my country, and I was very happy with the outcome of that discussion. So yeah, I feel more empowered to negotiate more and to contribute to the future sessions, be it SB 62 or in Belém next year. Among the highlights was also being with 23 other youth delegates from different walks of life, from different countries. Some are representing human stories who are living actual displacement due to climate change and climate migrants themselves. Some who are also negotiating on different tracks, myself on just transition, others on loss and damage, adaptation, and CQG. And also people who are from research or from advocacy backgrounds. So the learning journey was absolutely incredible, and I had the chance to experience both the heat of the negotiation rooms, but also what's happening in pavilions, side events, and what IOM has been contributing to. So yeah, thanks again for the trust and the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Noha. And I think if we have young people with such strong voices, we should not be worried about the future. Everything will be fine. So thank you for your insights. And now I would like to hear from Mr. Carmelo. Mr. Carmelo, you didn't attend personally the COP29, but I know you've been behind lots of the discussion, promoting sustainable agriculture, processes through a network of farmers markets. So if you can please give us your insight.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, for inviting me to attend to this important meeting today. Yes, I was not personally in Baku, but we have many of our members in the COP29. And please let me do a little passage also on the importance of the COP26 in Cali, in Colombia, concerning the biodiversity, that it was also a very important COP, and that is related also to the topic that we are discussing today, because all these topics are related to them, because that biodiversity is related to the environment, and both they are related to agriculture and to migration. So it's all connected. Okay, we were supporting an agreement in the COP29. We wanted a much more brave agreement, but finally an agreement it was on the table. And as we used to say, a bad agreement is also better than no agreement, also because we have the chance today to work on the field for the future. So now, is the glass half empty or half full? It depends from the work that we will provide on the field in the future. As supporter of local food systems, of the role that the local food system has to play in order to give a better opportunity to the planet to live in the future, linked to the good impact that the local food system they have on the environment, they have on the local economies, they have in order to give more value to the land and to the family farming work. We would like to address the attention of this agreement on the actions. Internationally, we are all full convinced that we need policies, that we need actions that can move in a different direction that we used to be in the past. I think that the involvement of young people is not just something who can ensure us for the future, but who can ensure us for the present, because they are people of today, not just for the future. As I said, we are ideas on that. The Secretary General of United Nations said during the last Food System Summit that the global food system is broken and that we have to change the direction. And so we are all convinced that we have to change the direction. We have a lot of policies all around the world. We have a lot of programs. And there are also, I don't know if too much funds or enough funds, but there are funds. What is important is the action, how we act on the field. And not only from the globe north through the globe south, but also in the globe south, how we work on the field, which is the direction that we want to give to agriculture, that is a fundamental player of the global change and of the migration flows in the world. Do we want to continue to invest in global free trade agreements without thinking to the environment? Do we want to continue to invest in global free trade agreements, and there are farmers in the majority of the country of the world that they cannot sell directly their food to the citizens? Is this the solution for the future, or we have to use this agreement, to use the 300 billion funds in order to act in a different direction. Is this a good agreement? I cannot say today. It will be a good agreement if we will go further to work in the good direction. If we will continue to stay on the pathway that we have used to be up to today, this will be not a good agreement.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the very insightful inputs from yourself. Thank you for discussing and highlighting the initiative. Thank you for presenting brave agreements. I think we need brave agreements. And I think the 300 billion you talked about under the new quantified goal for climate finance is just a base, because we need more. And also thank you for talking about action and operations. This fund, every action, every policy have to be translated into action to support women, children, elderly people in the field, to help them to survive and to get a resilient solution to climate action. And definitely agriculture, food security is key. When people will not have access to food, definitely they will move. And what we need to do is resilient action and support, not only from policy, but from operational level. Thank you so much, Mr. Carmelo, for your intervention. But now we will start to talk again to our panelists and hear about the migration context of Colombia. And it's a complicated, considering the influx and outflow of international migrants, including refugees and other vulnerable population. At the same time, it's one of the most biodiverse country. Colombia is at the center of climate change. So you are actually suffering with an intensified multiple crisis. So when we talk about adaptation, resilience, you are key in that. It will be great since we are having you here, and we have your voice also in negotiation with policymakers, to tell us, from your perspective in your current position, what strategies are being implemented to include migrants in Colombia's just transition policies toward net zero emission? And what do you see as key priorities for the Colombian government?
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in Spanish. So if you could use the... Bueno, hay mucho por contar, pero voy a tratar de ser muy concisa con las respuestas. Mi país, Colombia, es un país que tiene muchos desafíos en diferentes sectores que obstaculizan el desarrollo sostenible y que exacerban las brechas de pobreza. No tenemos una realidad común, especialmente por el conflicto armado que existe en el país. Un conflicto armado que lleva más de 50 años presente, y que, pese a haber tenido un acuerdo de paz sustancioso que se firmó en el 2016, sigue siendo el principal obstáculo para que las políticas migratorias o las políticas de acción climática puedan ser 100% efectivas en su implementación. Esto debido a que en el 2016, cuando se firmó el acuerdo de paz, no todos los miembros de los grupos armados estuvieron de acuerdo con ser parte del acuerdo de paz. En ese sentido, se crearon unas disidencias, unos grupos que aún continúan operando en las zonas con mayor biodiversidad y con mayor vulnerabilidad en el país. Las actividades que ellos realizan ponen en constante riesgo no solo la vida de las personas, de los habitantes y comunidades locales, como los defensores ambientales, donde, hago un paréntesis, Colombia ocupó el primer lugar según Global Witnesses en asesinatos a líderes ambientales, sino que también genera más brechas y obstáculos para implementar nuestras políticas nacionales. Como líder no solamente del proceso de incorporación de el enfoque de paz en la ANS, sino también como representante del Ministerio de Ambiente ante las mesas de negociación de los grupos armados, he tenido la oportunidad este año de participar en diferentes mesas de diálogo con el Estado Mayor Central de las FARC y con Segunda Marquetalia, dos grupos armados que tienen actualmente controlado gran parte del territorio del país, que está completamente con su presencia y que obstaculizan los posibles acuerdos de transformación territorial para la paz. Esto ha generado mucha más migración y desplazamientos internos por conflicto. Y en este sentido, no solamente tenemos la variable conflicto continuamente amenazando a las comunidades que llevan a que busquen otros territorios donde reubicarse, sino que también hay algunas situaciones multicausales que exacerban las brechas y generan muchos más motivos para incentivar la migración. Pero el problema es que los territorios focales como posibles zonas seguras para migrar, no todos cuentan con planes estratégicos de respuesta efectiva para poder recibir a todos los migrantes y darles todas las garantías de derecho de manera inmediata, mientras hay otros territorios en el país que sí cuentan con una mejor planificación o desarrollo de políticas migratorias para garantizar este proceso. Es decir, tenemos una situación de respuesta a la migración por múltiples causas, ya sea por conflicto o conflicto más causas climáticas o causas climáticas como inundaciones, incendios y demás situaciones que ha llevado desastres naturales por cambio climático, sino que tenemos una diferenciación marcada en el territorio por la capacidad de gestión o en algunos casos por falta de financiamiento y de articulación de políticas nacionales con políticas locales. Nosotros consideramos que las políticas de acción climática que estén enfocadas a la reducción de emisiones tienen que tener un enfoque sistémico y multidimensional. Y es algo que también estamos llevando a las negociaciones ante UNFCCC, al decir que los elementos que adoptó la Convención de Cambio Climático el año pasado, en la COP28 en Dubái, son una guía muy buena y efectiva para que sea implementada en las políticas nacionales. Y esta guía nos dice las transiciones no solamente deben ser a nivel energético o laboral, sino también socioeconómico y teniendo en cuenta otras dimensiones de acuerdo a las realidades y circunstancias nacionales. Pero especialmente nos habla de que para lograr una transición necesitamos reducir las brechas de pobreza y fomentar el desarrollo. Y esto aterrizado a la realidad de mi país, donde al sentarnos con un grupo armado, lo primero que nos dice, y les voy a citar el ejemplo, un comandante, el más alto comandante en nivel jerárquico de uno de los grupos armados más grandes de las fuerzas revolucionarias, estaba sentado frente a mí, estábamos 4 delegados de gobierno y nos dice: ¿ustedes quieren que dejemos las armas y que paremos el conflicto cuando ustedes son conscientes de toda la pobreza que hay en este territorio? Y nos decían, primero, ocúpense de dar una respuesta efectiva como gobierno y hablamos. Entonces, ¿eso qué quiere decir? Fomenten la educación, reduzcan la pobreza, promuevan seguridad y oferta de salud completamente garante para toda la población, porque habían zonas donde la población y las comunidades no tenían acceso a educación. Y generen estrategias de fomento de capacidades para que los jóvenes y los niños tengan otras alternativas que no sea ingresar a nuestros grupos armados, porque acá hay mucha pobreza y acá no hay oportunidades. Entonces, si ustedes gobierno no les dan las oportunidades y no los educan, ellos entran a nuestros grupos y nosotros no podemos decir no, porque ¿qué hacemos? O entran y sobreviven trabajando con actividades ilícitas o simplemente no tendrían ningún ingreso económico mensual. Entonces, bajo esa lógica, es entender que para poder generar una política de acción climática efectiva, podemos diseñar un programa con una articulación institucional, sectorial muy buena, entre Ministerio de Ambiente, entre Ministerio de Minas y Energía, por ejemplo, si es una estrategia de transición energética, territorial, maravilloso, perfecto, qué buena la voluntad, pero cuando llegamos a territorio, no es fácil la implementación si no fomentamos una estrategia para crear más diálogo social y sinergias con las comunidades, con el sector privado, teniendo en cuenta toda la población vulnerable, escuchando sus prioridades y necesidades, porque no todo lo que se formula a nivel nacional realmente es la prioridad o necesidad en el territorio. Entendiendo cuáles son sus prioridades, se generan hojas de ruta coherentes, con tiempos coherentes, que permitan salvaguardar sus derechos y luego, en la implementación de una política de acción climática, de reducción de emisiones, tener resultados eficientes. De lo contrario, no va a pasar. Otro ejemplo, en marzo de este año, en San José de Apartado, que es una comunidad que también está rodeada por un grupo armado que no está en negociación con el gobierno, se llama Clan del Golfo, ha sido uno de los grupos armados que más ha vulnerado los derechos de nuestra población colombiana. Nos hicieron un llamado como gobierno porque habían asesinado a una mujer y a un niño de 14 años 2 semanas atrás y nos pidieron ir después de 27 años sin que permitieran al Estado entrar a ese territorio. Fuimos 6 personas de gobierno, por primera vez después de 27 años, porque no nos habían permitido ingresar. Entramos a la comunidad, estaba una comunidad de paz, así se llama, comunidad de paz, que son habitantes de población rural que han sufrido el conflicto. Y nos decían, gracias por la oferta institucional de acción climática y de educación y demás de los ministerios, muchas gracias. Pero podrían, por favor, primero pensar en salvaguardar nuestra vida porque nos están asesinando. Entonces, escuchar esas cosas es realmente lo que toca nuestro corazón y nos hace sentir y entender que el compromiso tiene que ser de todos, que todo el gobierno tiene que articularse y que tenemos que ver cuáles son las causas estructurales que generan la migración, pero entender que la base siempre va a estar en las brechas de pobreza y en las brechas de desarrollo, y que si no intentamos promover estrategias para contrarrestar esa base, no vamos a tener soluciones efectivas para poder tener políticas de migración más eficientes. Colombia ha avanzado en políticas de migración, tenemos una regularización, por ejemplo, con los migrantes venezolanos, van aproximadamente 2 millones de migrantes que han sido regularizados, lo cual es muy positivo porque esto permite que tengan mayor acceso a los sectores formales laborales, pero algo muy necesario que necesitamos tener en cuenta es que para poder tener una política de migración efectiva, tenemos que fomentar las capacidades e invertir más en ese fomento de capacidades como parte de la transición justa de la fuerza laboral. Y eso quiere decir que tenemos un gran sector que ha dependido históricamente de unas actividades económicas que si queremos generar un movimiento o una transición hacia sectores más sostenibles y más efectivos en la reducción de emisiones, necesitamos enseñarles y capacitarlos para fomentar sus capacidades técnicas, tecnológicas, entre otras, para que sean aptos en el desarrollo de estas nuevas actividades laborales de los sectores sostenibles que permiten la reducción de emisiones. Y eso implica no solamente invertir en la estrategia de capacitación per se, de upskilling, reskilling, sino también en las brechas que pueden obstaculizar que la población o comunidad tenga una estrategia de capacitación efectiva. Por ejemplo, si en una comunidad que ha dependido por muchos años de los combustibles fósiles y yo como gobierno quiero implementar en ese territorio una estrategia de transición energética y le tengo que decir a la comunidad que ya no va a poder trabajar con combustibles fósiles allí, Eso hará que la comunidad quiera migrar y se quiera desplazar, a menos que yo le ofrezca alternativas para que se quede en su territorio, pero que aún tenga posibilidades de desarrollo económico. Pero para garantizarlo, tengo que prever y ver todo el mapa y el escenario completo. La comunidad tiene transporte, la comunidad tiene seguridad alimentaria, la comunidad tiene brechas de pobreza, la comunidad tiene brechas de género, porque si yo no trabajo en esas brechas, la estrategia no va a ser efectiva. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I would like to thank you also for having the courage to share all different experiences from Colombia. What I hear is a holistic approach, and I think that this is extremely important. Integration of Venezuelan migrants, amazing, and to see how you integrate social cohesion. And I loved what you said, the just transition is social, economic, and other transitions. And definitely, yes, this is what we are all pushing for. We definitely, the experience of Colombia is an experience of a number of countries who climate change come over and above existing situations, whether wars, whether conflict, whether economic situation or other. So thank you so much for sharing the experience from Colombia, and thank you for giving the insights and experience of the social cohesion, integration of migrants, and how this is extremely important in tackling also climate action and climate change crisis. So thank you. Now I will move from Colombia and I move again to the agriculture sector. And as we discussed, definitely agriculture sector is at the center of the climate action and migration. No food, no agriculture, definitely people will move where there is water, there is food, where their children and families can survive. And the impact is actually of course affected by the flooding, the water scarcity, the droughts. Everyone been talking about water and how the impact of water will even affect the peace agenda. Saying that, and we have with us Mr. Carmelo, it will be great to know from your point of view how agriculture is an economic sector that can make a significant contribution in combating climate change and migration. Which model of agriculture, from your experience, development do you see helps in this process? What is the role of migrants in this process? And what are the benefits from your previous experience that you can share with us?
Thank you very much again. As you said, agriculture is at the center of this process. And when we are at the center of something, we are also an element of balancing of different situations. And it depends also from the center, if the center move in a direction or in another direction, which can be the impact on the topics that we are discussing, and in that case, the migration. So from my point of view, migration is very strictly linked to food, food insecurity, hunger that still exists in the world. Although we don't like too much to talk about hunger, but it still exists in many countries of the world. Some data concerning the food insecurity from United Nations agencies that deal on food that are based in Rome. They talk about 800 million people who live in food insecurity. Is one of the factors of migration, together with the conflict and food insecurity. They are together pushing on the migration process, and food is linked for sure to agriculture, and so I think that agriculture is at the base of the topic, and it can be one of the problems, or it can be also one of the solution to the problem, or at least to help to go to a positive direction. Now, if we see some data always coming from United Nations. The 2019 was the first years in the human history where the people living in the cities overcome the people living in the rural area. Now, the largest migration process in the world is not from the south of the world to the north of the world, also because the majority of the migrants, they will remain in areas of food insecurity, and the majority of them are in the globe south. The largest process of migration is from the rural area to the urban area. This is the main problem we have, and why people they move from their home, why people they move from the rural area and they go to the urban area. The first reason is to have a better life. Is to have a better life condition, to live in a better situation. Yes, they move from the rural area for climate change, but if they move from the rural area to the urban area, they will contribute to the climate change. So how we can work to allow farmers, to allow people who live in the rural area to remain in the rural area. If we move from the principle that no one wants to leave their home and they want to stay, the only reason they have to move is because they don't live in a dignity in their home, and so they are obliged to move. And I think that this is one topic that we have not to be scared to mention also in this kind of meetings, that is the revenue of farmers. That is the value of the work of farmers. That is the value of food in our life. Because if we go to the supermarket and we buy the cheapest food there is in the supermarket, we have to think about the effect that this will have on the farmers that they live in the rural area and in the extreme rural area, not only in our cities here in Europe or in the globe north, but also in the globe south of the world. Which kind of agriculture system we want? We have never produced so much food in the world as we are producing today. According to the UN agencies, we produce food for 10 billion people, and we are 7 billion people. And we have 800 million people that are in food insecurity or hunger in the world. So the problem is not that we don't have food. The problem is the value that we give to the people who produce food. The problem is that this system of food is not working, because from one side is not giving the chance to all the people of the world to eat. From the other side is contributing to the climate change, is contributing to the migration process, it is contributing to the loss of biodiversity. Another data that is very, very dangerous is that we lost in the last 100 years the 75% of food biodiversity in the world. It just remains 25%. And if we just talk about preservation of biodiversity, is not enough. We have just 25%. And maybe we should use part of the money of COP29 to not just preserve the biodiversity that it remains, but to renew the biodiversity in the world, moving to a different agriculture, global agriculture systems that can give the chance to local food systems to grow from the ground, from creating new relationship between urban area and rural areas. There are still huge barriers between urban and rural areas. In the majority of the countries of the world, farmers, they cannot go to sell in an organized way, recognized by the law, to sell directly their products to the citizen. We created the World Farmers Market Coalition together with some friends. I just give you the short history of the World Farmers Market Coalition. It's a very young association. The idea, it was in the first, in the very beginning of the COVID pandemic. I was in Rome. We have, in Italy, we have a large system of farmers market with the foundation Campagna Amica that was created by one of the largest farmers union in Europe, that is called Dirette. We run some like 1,200 farmers market. It's a real local food system, so where Italian people, they can buy local food directly from farmers every weekend if they want. And so in that period, the Italian government was thinking to close the farmers market because places where people use it together. And so I started to surf on the web to see what other people were doing in the world, and I met some people from the United States, the Farmers Market Association in the United States, some people from Canada, some people from Ghana, and we started to think to a coalition, and we presented it to Amina Mohammed, the Vice Secretary General of the United Nations, and she supported us. We became one of the food coalition of FAO, and today we are more than 80 associations from all around the world. But why we created this association? Because we want to fight against the barriers that still remain between the rural areas and the urban areas. We want that farmers could be free to sell their products into the city. We want that the city will open their doors to farmers to go to sell their products to the cities, because this is a way to have a better revenue. This is a way to include women in the family farming activity. This is the way to include the children in the development of the family farmers farming activities. And this is the reason why we are calling to invest in local food system, because we should give the chance to the farmers to have a better revenue, to have added value to their work, to their production, because this is the only way we can help them to stay at their home, to remain in the rural area. But it's not so easy. It's not so easy. There are a lot of resistance against this process. We are running a project of international cooperation financed by the Italian government in the Mediterranean area. We are working with countries like Egypt, Lebanon, Tunisia, and we started a project in Egypt, in the city of Alexandria, with the Chamber of Commerce of Alexandria, and with the support of excellent people that helped us to meet with farmers, to do a trainership program with the farmers, to train the farmers market manager for the city of Alexandria. And after 1 year and a half of work together, we created this community of farmers, and we opened the first farmers market in Alexandria of Egypt. We had the inauguration. We had the second day with many people, with the governor of Alexandria, with many people attending to the farmers market. And the third weekend, we received a letter from the governor that apologized, but many forces from economic forces from the cities, they asked to move the farmers market from the main square where it was established to 20 kilometers from there, because they were concerned about the impact that the farmers who they go to sell in the city, this could have to their business. It was thanks to the Italian ambassador, to the relationship, to the diplomacy that Italy put in place with the governor of Alessandria, with the support of the Egyptian Minister of Production, that we moved from that place but 500 meters and not 20 kilometers from that place. And today the farmers market is working in Alessandria. The farmers are very happy. The Chamber of Commerce of Alessandria is very happy, and the consumers and the citizens are very happy. But this was just an example of how difficult it is to change the direction. But this is for sure a medium and long-term strategy that will not solve the problem today. But I think that agriculture is also a way to help the people who are obliged to leave their home, that we can receive them in a very dignity way. If we support the family farming also in our country, when the migrants will arrive to our country, they should be very much welcome, because they are at the center of our agriculture and our food production. We always used to talk about made in Italy. We are so proud about the made in Italy agriculture production in Italy, but there is not made in Italy without migrants. This must be sure for everybody. The majority of the people who work in our family farms are people coming from third countries, from the globe south above all. But I would like to tell you, and I close just one little story. Once I met one of our farmers. We were in a farmer's market. He was discussing with another guy, and the discussion was not so nice concerning some migrants in their town. You know, they come here, they take our work, they do the, you know, what people they say when they discuss in this way. And I said to him, yes, but please, what about your workers that they work with you in your farms? You have 10 people coming from Africa that they work in your farm. And the answer was, they are not migrants, they are my family.
Yeah.
And so you see, if we create the good environment, if we work on an agriculture system that can help to have a better condition in the family farming in the Globe South and in the Globe North, the outcome will be better also for migration.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Carmelo. And I don't know, lots of very inspiring stories, whether the one from Egypt or the one about migrants as a solution, as you said, but also a striking information, the 800 million in 2024 in hunger. And let me quote a colleague of mine in the World Bank when he said, people move from rural to urban to cities looking for food security, water, livelihood, but in the cities, in the urban settings, they are actually getting more and more lost. They are not there to cover for everyone. So the solution is to focus into the root cause of the problem, look into a resilient solution for people to stay, but also look into the labor migration, the benefit and the importance of actually social cohesion, having them as a family, because they are part of the solution when it comes to climate change, when it comes to agriculture, and when it comes to just transition. And since we heard from Mr. Carmelo about that, maybe we can hear the voice of the young people. And I'm looking into Noha. Noha coming from North Africa, and she's been speaking, putting the voice of African youth. Africa is one of the very young continents where 60% or more are young people. It will be great to hear from you. Also, you talked about how you've been a negotiator on just transition and one of the young negotiators in just transition. How can you see the role of young people, the perspective of young people, to be part of the conversation around labor migration and climate change, and how you see them part of the solution from a negotiator, young negotiator point of view?
Thank you, Rania. So coming from the other side of the Mediterranean, unfortunately, climate migration and labor migration is not a topic of tomorrow, it's a topic of today. In Tunisia, my country, 37.48% is the rate of youth unemployment. It's almost triple the global average. Other intersections are, for instance, water shortage. A very strong shortage of water is the case also in other countries in the MENA region and in Africa. So yeah, from my perspective, what we bring as youth is, first of all, the sense of urgency and of intergenerational equity, because talking about just transition, it has two pillars. Equity, so in this sense, intergenerational equity as catalysts and enablers of a just transition, but also of inclusiveness. So us as youth being part of the negotiation table is the only way to ensure that we are deciding on what's going to happen and on how to implement the 1.5 targets and on how to take every perspective into consideration. So we as youth have been criticized often for being angry and impulsive. I think this is a good approach to have and to bring into the table, because the texts are not enough. We need actually to speak about it. We need to display the information on different channels, be it through UNFCCC channels, but also through social media, through our own networks, through our national channels, and so on and so forth. So yeah, in this sense, the second is also the innovative approach that we do have. So we as youth are part of different networks, be it constituencies for the youth like Yungo, or be it youth networks in which both Global South and Global North are working together for the same goals. This is something that probably negotiators, more seasoned negotiators have been not always able to do because of the different positions and different mandates, but from a youth perspective, this has been a reality, sharing the same generational concerns as enablers of the green transition. So yeah, this is one platform. Second of all, we are also rewriting the narrative on just transition and on climate migration. So through, for example, influencers that have been outspoken, we could see a lot of content created on social media throughout the COP, before the COP, and also still continuing. Right after the COP, we are also debriefing other youth, global youth, on what has been happening, on the concerns of the Global South more specifically. But as I mentioned, we do not have this we do not have this separation in terms of youth because we work for the same goal and we do not really align with certain mandates rather than the actual aims of the Paris Agreement. Third, it is an innovation that we do bring in question. So as early adopters of technology, but also as an intersectional approach. So we as youth, we do not look at things into silos, like environmental and social intersect for us. So we could see a lot of protests within COP, people who are raising aspects of human rights, indigenous communities, peace and security, all together in interrelation with climate migration, because there is no justice without there's no just transition without climate justice. And finally, through the lived experiences that have been shared and amplified, because yeah, data is very important. Numbers can speak very loud, even louder than words, but so do stories, human stories that can touch wider communities and inform on the realities beyond the screens. So the way I would see best and most effective to bring in these voices and actionably work on the intersection between climate migration and just transition is first by institutionalizing the role of youth. So I'm very happy and very privileged to be a youth negotiator on behalf of my country, very happy to have seen other youth negotiators from other African countries, MENA region, and to see this process being duplicated in other countries, which means that it's working and it's making an impact. So that is one way to work on it. And the thing is, youth, we are not waiting for permission to act on climate action. We are actually expecting governments and global institutions to meet us halfway and to work together hand in hand for intergenerational equity. Then another way is through skills building. So when we talk about just transition, very important terms often mentioned are upskilling and reskilling, but this skilling is not only related to technical skills, but we have to also address soft skills, because mainly youth have been addressed through the upskilling perspective, so to build skills to integrate new economies or to shift from within the economies. So soft skills include like project management, but also other aspects related to greener industries and also agriculture and fisheries and so on, because a just transition is not only a just energy transition. So yeah, a final note is the global solidarity. I think this is a very, very important aspect that youth have been working towards. The networking that have been happening through COP, SPs and more is absolutely fantastic, and it personally gives me a lot of hope that we can actually reactivate the hope in multilateralism in the future. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Noha. Yes, actually, we need to applaud you for such a very strong intervention. And no one is too young to be part of the decision. And I think that young people who has been in COP 29, but also we see them in every forum, negotiators, having the courage. You are not angry and impulsive. You are brave, innovative, young, passionate, and smart. And this is something that we need. We all need, and we need to learn from. In institutionalizing the role of young people, I think that now, starting by IOM, we know that very well. It's part of our strategy. Youth is everywhere. When it comes to IOM, you are not waiting for permission. We know that. It's very obvious, which is great, and we are all behind. But also skills building and global solidarity. We cannot go anywhere with climate, with migration, unless we have the global solidarity and we have building the capacity and the raising awareness of our community. So thank you so much for that. I'm sure our member states and colleagues and friends around the room would like to ask a number of questions, such an amazing panelist. So I'll give the floor again to Michelle to open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rania, very much, and thank you so much to each of our panelists. You've brought forward some really interesting perspectives, experience, and ideas, not only on COP29, but on a much broader range of subjects. Thank you. So, team, the floor is open, and I see Paul Tacon from ILO has asked for the floor. Paul, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you very much to Rania for that very interesting moderation, and also for the great collaboration during the COP. I also want to thank Noha, who I had the pleasure to meet in Baku, and thank you also to Maria Cifuentes. It's really great to hear that Colombia was behind this really important initiative in the Just Transition Work Program, because indeed we believe that the role of migration in the Just Transition is absolutely critical. And all people on the move, in fact, including internally displaced persons and refugees. So for perhaps just a little history, I mean, ILO has developed actually, or the constituents of ILO developed through a tripartite process, the Just Transition Guidelines, which are focused on a transition that brings together a rights-based approach, a decent work, and international equity, poverty eradication, and sustainability, so, and intergenerational equity. So many of the points that speakers already raised. And we really do see the critical importance of considering the role of migrants in a just transition, whether that be for adaptation, for mitigation. We're talking about, of course, the skill gap that we see in the green sectors, and the potential for migrants to perhaps help with filling those skill gaps, also in terms of addressing loss and damage. But throughout all of this, of course, decent work is really at the core. As those who've maybe heard me talk about this before, well, those who've heard me talk about this before will have heard me say, without decent work, it doesn't work. For example, if we look at migration in the context of adaptation, if someone has had to pay huge recruitment fees, if they are forced into situations of forced labor, then they may find themselves worse off because of migration rather than better off. But I think also coming to what Ms. Cifuentes mentioned, some key words here are really about consistency between just transition and labor mobility, and a systemic approach. So I really appreciate those inputs, because those are absolutely critical, and that's certainly how the ILO is working. We have been given a mandate by our constituents last year to look at exactly this issue of coherence and consistency, coherence between just transition and labor mobility frameworks. And so we really appreciate Colombia's focus. I also highlight the importance of ILO Recommendation 205 on decent work for peace and reconstruction, which is also, I think, very relevant to the situations of conflict that you were mentioning. And again, also just really highlighting the critical importance of social dialogue. And I think that's an inclusive social dialogue that includes migrants. That's why it was really fantastic to see that was the approach that was taken by Colombia, because of course, when we talk about the transition, who is going to carry out the transition? Well, it's the employers and the workers, the actors of the real economy, of the real world of work. So bringing them in, and bringing in the migrant parts, the migrant entrepreneurs, the youth migrant entrepreneurs, the workers, is absolutely critical. So ILO is absolutely keen and actively working in collaboration with our colleagues at IOM, and thank you once again for this opportunity, through the UN Network on Migration, our membership of the Task Force on Displacement, with our social partners and all other stakeholders, including cities. We know that cities are also a very important partner in this role, to fulfill the mandate that has been given to us by our constituents, and looking forward to working with all of you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you from ILO. I now have the United Kingdom has asked for the floor. You have the floor, Madame.
Thank you, Rania, and thank you to the panelists for these very poignant reflections. The climate crisis is the greatest challenge the world faces. Tackling it is central to the work of the UK government. This is critical given the state of the threat, but also the scale of the opportunity. We have the chance to achieve green energy, drive growth, and to preserve the natural world around us, on which all prosperity ultimately depends. The UK is committed to tackling climate and nature emergencies. To do this, we need to, as the speakers have said, address root causes and invest in anticipatory actions that build resilience and independence. We also need to accelerate the global clean power transition. The UK government has committed to clean power by 2030 at home, but our ambitions are bigger than that. We want to partner with those at the cutting edge of clean power to help speed up the delivery of clean power globally. We want our clean energy ambitions to go global. This is why, working with international partners, the UK launched the Global Clean Power Alliance to champion this effort at the G20 Leaders Summit this week. Clean energy transition represents a huge opportunity to bolster energy security, reduce costs for working people, and to produce thousands of green jobs in existing and future industries. Recognising the critical workforce challenges within the energy sector transition, the UK has established the Office for Clean Energy Jobs, dedicated to ensuring that clean energy jobs are not only abundant but also of high quality, focusing on fair pay, favourable terms and good working conditions. To summarise, the energy transition must be delivered in the right way, ensuring workforces are prepared and empowered to lead in these critical green industries to speed up the global drive for clean power. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the representative of the United Kingdom, and great to hear about the Global Clean Power Alliance. That sounds like a very promising initiative. Isesco, Madame, you have the floor. Are very active.
I'm very sorry to take the floor as many times.
No, we're happy to hear from you as often as you'd like to engage. Thank you.
Being working on this issue since 2017, I just want to say that this session is a very great session. Thank you to all of you and to the moderator, Madam Rania, and to our young, energetic two participants, two panelists. Thank you very much. Allow me to say that we at ICISCO, we have 54 member states in ICISCO. And we have targeted youth by many different programs. And ICISCO participated successfully in the COP29 in Baku. We have just opened a new office there in Azerbaijan. But there is many very effective programs, young professional programs, ICT training and capacity building, AI, innovation programs. We are focusing on this kind of programs for the future, for the whole member states. Wherever we run a program, we try to engage all these member states. We bring young talent from all these countries. We have our youth ambassadors in the different programs of ICISCO. So I think the engagement of the youth and having them with IOM, having them part of the conversation, is something that we should say congratulations to IOM that having this step. It's a very good initiative, and engaging the beneficiaries themselves will bring new ideas and innovative ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I quite agree with you. Congratulations, IOM, for taking the step to include a youth delegate on the delegation. As my friend next to me also pointed out, it's a very important move. Excellent, and thank you for your comments, and we'll look forward to seeing the work of your organization, Madam. The floor is open, and I don't see any requests. Please, Madam from Refugee, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, congratulations to IOM and to all the organizers of this event. Hats off to you, very successful one. I have actually some comments and questions to the panel, and related, of course, to, we all have been saying that migration as a tool for development and cities being the engines of growth. Now, when it comes to labor migration, I've been hearing also that we need to really identify the root causes of the reason why people migrate, particularly in urban areas. And as also having a background in urban settlements, is I think we need also to look into who are the key actors that will help promote also or provide solution to this challenge. And the private sector is one of them, as mentioned in the previous session as well. I'm thinking that one of the root causes of people migrating from rural to urban areas is because of the lack of opportunities, livelihood opportunities, so infrastructure support and basic services. And that's why they are enticed to the opportunities in the cities. However, wouldn't we consider also a reverse migration where we invest also in the rural and peri-urban areas so as to bring these opportunities to the people so that they don't need to move. And considering that now there has been a trend of climate-induced migration, particularly disasters in urban areas such as flooding and earthquakes. So that could minimize also the risk and loss of lives where people all group together in the urban areas. So that's one question I have for the panel. What do you think would be one of the solutions where private sector could engage and help develop the peri-urban and rural areas to support also the movement of people towards the cities? And the other one is, of course, with the movement of people to the cities that puts a strain to basic services. Therefore, people get disappointed, frustrated, where you have the crime rates, high unemployment, and all those consequential problems that are because of this. So I'm just thinking aloud and looking outside the box, given also within the context of climate-induced migration and mobility. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a really profound set of comments and questions, and it makes me think also of the representative that we had earlier today from local governments, and obviously there's a great link, a very direct link with local and urban governments here. Let me see if we have any other questions, and if not, I will turn back to Rania to see if the panelists would like no more than 1 minute each for a final word. Thank you so much. To the floor. Back to you, Rania.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you so much for the insights and the questions from all the colleagues around the room. I would like to give the floor again to my dear panelists, but also it would be good to give us also your last word of wisdom, what you can see as an opportunity and what is a challenge that we can all listen to and be part of the solution for the challenge. Let's start by you.
First, to answer your question, and then this is very much related to what I want to say about the opportunities and challenges. I think that in terms of urban planification, there are many opportunities to enhance and develop better policies for guaranteeing that the gap that we have and the current situation that we have of migration from rural to urban areas continue being exacerbated. And I think that through the development plans, local development plans with the subnational governments, it's important to integrate a very good diagnostic and strengthened the diagnostics that we could approach in order to see the existing priorities and necessities that we have in the rural areas, and try to develop some specific indicators that could allocate resources, in practical terms, could allocate resources for capacity building, for the just transition of the workforce. And then in that sense, the private sector, as you said, has this key role of helping the government and promoting this articulation in providing also the financial support for the, or directly the training for the rural communities. So it's important, first, allocate indicators, have occurrence with the planification instruments, so any policy for climate action, for example, or migration should be completely focused and interrelated with the development plans. And that means allocating resources with this baseline and some outcomes to pursue in short and middle and long term. The NDCs also has an important role here. The national determined contribution of each country. It's also a big opportunity, and I would like to invite, for closing my intervention, to invite everybody here. Now that we are updating our NDCs that should be submitting at the beginning of next year, is a great opportunity to guarantee that we enhance a migration approach for climate action to identify what could be the opportunities at national levels according to the national circumstances to strengthen the approaching of this item into the policy with actors, responsible actors, as private sector, national sectors, as ministries or subnational governments, inviting them to formulate new measures with the migration approach and promoting bridges for having financial support or financial guarantee of implementing the measures in the NDCs. That's the general invitation or advice.
Thank you so much, Maria, and definitely we will listen to the advice, we accept the invitation, and we want to be part of the solutions. Thank you so much for that. And now I will give the floor to Mr. Carmelo to give us his last word of wisdom, the opportunity and the challenge.
Yes, the opportunity we have is that in this moment we can really decide to change the global food system and to go in the direction of investing in the growth of local food system that can have a positive impact on the environment, on the biodiversity, on the workers, on the migration, on the new relationship between cities and rural areas. The challenges, from my point of view, we should avoid the mistake that we have done in the past. Many times, in order to have a solution to very important problems rise from the society, we took some very bad solution, and now we are trying to find the solution to that bad solution. So I think that for food sector, we should avoid that on the base of the request to change the global food system, to fight the hunger, to fight the food insecurity, to fight against the climate change, we will follow the way that some very powerful private interests are proposing to go in the direction of hyper-processed food or laboratory product food. This is a very tough challenge because to do something good, the treaty is to follow a very bad solution and pathway.
Thank you so much, Mr. Carmelo, and thank you for your last word of wisdom. Opportunities, the challenges, we're all here together in that. Last word from our young champion, Noha.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I really liked the question on the reverse migration. That is a topic that personally I find very important, because nowadays we can see that there are youth migrants who are trying to reconnect with their lands, invest in, for instance, in regenerative farming or in agribusiness. So talking about migrants is not always about remittances, but also investment and also bringing in funds. Finally, I would say the opportunities come from a better matching of skills in the labor market with the green economy. And then as for the challenges that we have to address more and work more on safe migration pathways, because migrants, more particularly youth migrants who are seeking better opportunities and also escaping climate-induced catastrophes, are still exploited, have not always access to the information they need. Sometimes it's language barrier, sometimes it's legal, lack of legal understanding of the systems in the countries they are in, be it countries of transit or the countries of destination. So safe migration pathways is a challenge that we have to always put at the forefront of a just transition pathway. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Noah. And thank you so much for the panelists and Michelle and all the colleagues and partners around the room today for listening to us. I know at 2 p.m. after lunch is not always easy, but I think the fruitful discussion was very enjoyable for everyone. And let me summarize 2 points. I think everyone talked about actions. When it comes to climate, everyone is vulnerable. But of course, some countries are more vulnerable than others because of the multiple intensified crises. A whole of a society approach, a holistic approach to actually find solution for climate change. And when we talk also about whole of a society, we talk about communities, women, children, young people, migrants, refugees, and others that need to be part of the decision making and the solution. Listen and integrate these voices is extremely important. Labor migration and the opportunities of labor migration to ensure just transition are significant and continue to grow as we move further. And food cannot be taken for granted. So definitely farmers, agriculture, working together, because urban will not always have food, livelihood, and water. We need to find solution to ensure investment in rural and agriculture as well. I would like to end by saying one thing. Nelson Mandela, a quote from him, it always seems impossible until it's done. And I think by having this conversation here today, across the room with all of us, with our young people, with the decision being taken from one COP to another, from one situation to another, I think it will be done. And it will be done by the global solidarity, by all of us coming together. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I want to give the floor to Michelle, and really looking forward to have side conversations after.
Thank you so much, Rania. Let me invite you all to thank Rania and the panel. Great job, everybody. This was super interesting and lively. Thank you so much. And with that, I invite you to retake the floor as I see our next panel is ready. And may I invite the speakers for the next panel to please come join me on the podium. And as a transition, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I will be in touch with you, absolutely. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Muchas gracias, muy amable, excelente, muy interesante. So, this will be the last session, the last panel. And while they're ascending to the podium, I'll remind you what it's about. So this one is on combating disinformation to enable the realization of regular pathways solutions. I think this is an extremely timely topic and discussion. And let me make one announcement as the panelists and the moderator get seated. I want to remind everybody, especially because Patricia's right here right now, Can you hear me now? Okay, excellent. I want to remind all of you who are registered for the IOM Council beginning tomorrow morning that we are starting at 9 a.m., not at the normal 10 a.m. that most UN meetings start. You'll be in this room at 9 a.m. Please come then so you can hear the Director General opening and the high-level segment. We look forward to seeing all those who have registered here tomorrow morning in this very room at 9 a.m. And Catalina, cuando estás lista, yo puedo trasladar a ti. It gives me great, great pleasure to introduce Ms. Catalina de Vandas, Senior Director for the Office of Partnerships, Advocacy, and Communications at IOM. She is both the representative of the Director General and Senior Director for the area that I just mentioned to you, the first time that we've had this position in IOM, and I can't think of any better to fill it. Catalina is a Costa Rican lawyer with over 20 years of experience in multilateral affairs, international negotiations, high-level diplomacy, and resource mobilization, both within and outside the UN system. She has served as Executive Director of the Disability Rights Fund, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Costa Rica to the UN here in Geneva, and as the first UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of people with disabilities. Before this, early in her career, she worked with the World Bank in Latin America in the Caribbean. Tengo el gran gusto y honor para pasar la palabra a Catalina. Tienes la palabra.
Muchísimas gracias, Michelle. Thank you very much, Michelle, and thanks everyone for being here, joining us on this very exciting panel that we're going to have. We are the last of the day, and I know that the energy levels drop, but I am pretty sure that the topic that has convened us here will make it worth the stay. And we are very, very pleased to have this amazing panel, and that we are going to be discussing a very important topic, the topic of how to combat disinformation to enable the realization of regular pathways and solutions. As mentioned in my area of work in the Office of Partnerships, Advocacy and Communication, we face the challenges of how to deal with misinformation and disinformation when it comes to migration. And we're certainly looking forward to these informative discussions of this topic. During the day, we have heard many examples of how facilitating regular migration through balanced approaches can catalyze sustainable development and support the green transition. However, we also know that we are currently facing challenges and that evidence-based balanced approaches are being increasingly undermined because of the proliferation of misinformation and disinformation on this topic. Misinformation and disinformation are widely recognized as posing major risk to systems and structures, as well as the ability to realize solutions for the global challenges. Just recently, the Global Economic Forum rated misinformation and disinformation as the top immediate global risk the world is currently facing. The major risk, of course, is that all the good, positive work being done on safe, orderly, and regular migration can be drawn out through misinformation. And this is even a bigger challenge in a world where the majority of information is shared online, including through social media. This includes the spread of xenophobic messages on social media or false information on recruitment processes of migration workers. The questions then are, how can we counter this? Can the provision of accurate information on migration and tailor information to key groups across different digital ecosystems be impactful? How about adopting comprehensive multi-stakeholder approaches that involve actions by a wide range of actors? This could include policymakers and technology platforms. But how can we broaden our thinking to include other stakeholders, such as the private sector actors, civil society, media, and of course, migrants and diaspora? Reflecting on these questions is all the more important as today, generative artificial intelligence is raising new challenges and opportunities in terms of disinformation on migration. We see tools such as ChatGPT and how they can be used to spread false narratives quickly and efficiently, often outpatching the efforts to counteract them. On the other hand, could these same generative artificial intelligence tools offer solutions, such as rapid and robust means of detecting and mitigating disinformation? To discuss these questions and more, and all the context in which we are, we have gathered expert speakers for this panel to share their experiences, their insights, and their ideas about how we can effectively collaborate on combating misinformation, with the goal, of course, of facilitating balanced solutions towards regular migration. I will then now like to welcome our 4 distinguished panelists that are here with us today. First, Madame Luana Medeiros, who is the Director of the Department of Migrations from the Ministry of Justice and Public Security of the Government of Brazil. Mr. Rajendra Raut, Chief Executive Officer and CEO of a non-resident Nepali association, NRNA. His Excellency Mustafa Omer, President of the Somali Regional State of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. And of course, last but not least, one of our IOM youth chain makers and IOM African Union Ambassador from Zambia, Mr. Walter Kasemba. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your background and perspective through these discussions. But in order to make the most of our short time together, I will ask you to keep your responses brief and concrete, and so that we can touch on the many important topics that we have at hand. I would like to start with a first question, which is based on key evidence relating to disinformation on migration. Could you please share your insights on how disinformation on migration and migrants has impacted the realization of increased regular migration pathways? Madame Luana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Catalina. Good afternoon, everybody. First, I would like to thank IOM for this invitation on behalf of the Brazilian government. We do take fighting against misinformation and xenophobia and racism that comes from that very seriously in the Brazilian government. Brazil is very lucky, I can say at this point, to not have migration as one of the hottest topics in our political scenario. I think everybody here knows that migration has been deciding elections, putting people apart, and polarizing a lot of the countries in the world. In Brazil, migration is still seen as a positive phenomena, and when it's seen, a lot of the times it's not a topic, and that's because one of the misinformation we've been trying to fight. In Brazil, we actually have way more Brazilians abroad than migrants in our territory. Less than 1% of our population is composed by migrants, which counts for around 1.7 million people. And since we are a very big country, those migrants are mostly spread out throughout the country. And that's another thing we're trying to work very much, which is making possible for people to get across the country so they find better opportunities for integration, and also the burden on the local communities is shared among the different cities of the country. Well, I would like to say that IOM is a crucial partner for us in this fight, both on one hand, providing technical support, but also collecting data, publishing information, publishing reports, and also helping us create evidence and therefore evidence-based policies with, for example, the MGI and DTM and all other tools that IOM offers the Brazilian states and all of its member states to know more about migration. Well, in Brazil, collecting data and creating policies based on evidence is actually in our migration law. We have the obligation as a government to keep both numbers and studies and other information on migration, and to use that data to formulate our policies and to publicize the data as much as we can as a government. I think that helps a lot to create a tradition and a structured response that is more down to earth and actually sees the situation as it is, and not only as the media or some loudspeakers like to show. I think the biggest challenge when it comes to misinformation for governments, specifically, which is my point of view, is that when the society is very much polarized and the discussion is too hot out there, governments get afraid because governments need public support. We are here because our governments were elected, and we have to respond to the voters, and we have to keep them with us if we want to keep, well, in the government. So it's very important that we actually fight whatever is wrong and publicize whatever is right, so we can choose the best policy to our reality, to our needs, but we also keep a good flow of information within the society and within our countries. Well, I'll stay here for now, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madame Medeiros, and I now give the floor to Mr. Rajendra Raut.
Thank you very much, Madam Catalina and respected speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rajendra Raut. I'm representing Non-Resident Nepali Association, is a Nepali diaspora working for the rights and benefits of migrant workers and non-resident Nepalis around the world, and we are associated currently at 86 countries. As the topic is very clearly given to me, and the discussion is on the misinformation or disinformation. As we all know, Nepali diaspora is closely working with the government of Nepal and migrant workers, their families in different destination countries as well as country of origin in Nepal. As you all know, anti-migrants disinformation is a global challenge which distrust migration issues, and it adversely affects the overall regular migration pathways. It fosters xenophobia, portraying migration issues threats to not only local economy, but for the stability both at destination countries and country of origin. It is a major social problem to deal on regular migration pathways, especially undocumented women migrant workers, domestic workers are more vulnerable on disinformation or misinformation. So what we have seen in the evidence, if you look at the Minister of Local Employment and Social Security data, every year more than 700,000 Nepalese migrant workers leaving the country for foreign employment opportunity through the documented process, legal way. But there are a number of Nepali migrant workers, women migrant workers leaving the country without any documents. They are the most vulnerable. And talking about the migrant workers' contribution, according to the National Reserve Bank, we call it Nepal Rashtra Bank of 2020-23 data, around 22.7% of the remittance contributing for the gross domestic GDP, gross domestic product. We understand it is not the last resort, but we have to accept it that it's been contributing a lot for the GDP. So if the misinformation or disinformation that we have realized during the COVID-19, that we had implemented a project in Middle East, Malaysia, and also in Nepal in partnership with IOM and ILO for the relief, repatriation, and especially. So during that period, actually Nepali diaspora organization, we are not closely working with the SAARC countries, but definitely beyond SAARC countries. But we understand the issues of the migrant workers, so we are collaborating for different stakeholders to uphold the rights and benefits of the migrant workers. So we are working with the 3 tiers of the government: local government, province government, and the federal government to sensitize at the local level, and also because the NRNA has lots of volunteers in the different countries, so we are collaborating with the diplomatic missions in the destination countries through the mobilization of the volunteers to strengthen the capacity of the diplomatic mission, because we only have the 49 around countries of diplomatic missions around the world, but migrant Nepalese NRNA is working for more than 86 countries. So through these networks, through volunteer mobilization, we're trying to strengthen to sensitize the migrants' rights, policies, advocacy. And we are collaborating with the IOM and different IOM Nepal mission, global diaspora mapping, and also the knowledge and experience of the diaspora through the Diaspora Knowledge Convention. There are different forums on migration and development that we are collaborating each other to minimize the possible disinformation or misinformation through different initiatives. And we really thank you for inviting me as the panelist on behalf of the Nepal Non-Resident Nepali Association. I've been working since last 3 decades in Nepal for migration, refugees, and many other cross-cutting issues. Thank you. Thank you. I'll talk about another many areas. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rahoot, and thank you also to both of the speakers. First, to raise how well-managed migration is good and helps us to reduce misinformation and work with evidence-based policies and how it helps, and also for bringing the relevance of creating partnerships with all different sectors engaged, from the diplomatic community, the UN system, the communities, to promote good practices. With that, I would like to give the floor to Your Excellency, Mustafa Omer. Please, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, colleagues and participants of this panel discussion. It's my privilege to say a few things on the topic of disinformation and migration from the perspective of an African country, second most populous African country, Ethiopia, which happens to also host close to 1 million people as migrants in Ethiopia, which also is the route through which a number of other African brothers and sisters use as a route when they are going for migration to Middle East, to Europe and other countries, and which also itself produces its share of migrants. So when I looked at the panel and the question, I reflected on the disinformation from the perspective of the migrant producing country mainly, because I felt the question was more related to the impact of disinformation in the host countries, xenophobia, crime, political implications, culture and identity related challenges that migrants face in the destination countries. But as an Ethiopian and also from African perspective, I think that disinformation that has the highest impact on our communities is the one related on the opportunities related to migration, particularly on the expectations that are created by success stories of migrants, which tend to overstate the blessing and the successes of migrants in developed countries, but also understate the challenges and failures that migrants face along the routes, particularly when they go through irregular migration. So from that angle, I think the best way of handling this would be to find the right data on the opportunities, the right information, but also to be aware of the efficacy of data, or rather the inefficacy of data in this post-truth world when it comes to informing opinions about migrations. So as far as the developed country problem is concerned, I think that disinformation is related to the issues I raised earlier about the xenophobia, the political polarizations that we see in the West, in Western countries. And I think it's not only nowadays something that is about disinformation, but I think it's having some real political implications in the sense that in a lot of traditionally migrant hosting countries, the rise of right-wing political parties indicates that the impact has now gone beyond what we would normally expect it, or it to be only something on the narratives. It's having a real consequence for people, with policies also affected because of the decisions that are made by politicians. And since this is the case, I think from our perspective, from developing country perspectives, the solution is to ensure that there are systems and structures and strategies to ensure that the demand for migration and the supply that migration-producing countries have are made to link. And in that regard, I think the experience of Ethiopia with the establishment of labor information systems is instructive, because 2 years ago, we established a regional interministerial forum, which Ethiopia chaired for 2 years in East Africa. We also established the Ethiopian labor information system, and this has helped in most of the labor that used to go to the Middle East now to go regularly through channels that are traceable and legal. I can maybe share the figure. When this system was not in place, I think about 40,000, mainly unskilled women, were registered to have been going to Middle East. But with the establishment of this information system, which links the demand and supply, more than 300,000 has been registered. This means that because of the information provided, a lot of people have chosen the legal pathways. And of course, that reduces also the challenges that we face with regular migration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and also for bringing what are the challenges of disinformation at the countries of origins and the balance that is needed between the narratives of success stories versus the difficulties also that the migrants face in their journeys. And also for discussing this need of meeting demand and supply and having these conversations. So without further ado, I will now to give the floor to our youth change maker. Please, you have the floor, Walter.
Thank you so much, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As has been mentioned, my name is Walter Kasempa. I am an IOM youth change maker and also the AU IOM Migration Youth Ambassador. Now, migration for me is not just about moving people across borders, but it is about establishing the fundamental principles of what it means to be a human being, which is unity, solidarity, and collective identity. Now, I believe, interestingly, that the issue of disinformation remains, at this current moment, the most critical and most fundamental issue of our lifetime. Words and narratives begin wars. Words and narratives end wars. Words and narratives create perspective. Words and narratives distort the truth. Now, before I delve into what I need to say, I think it's really important for us to understand where we came from so that we can discern where we are and we can look forward to where we're coming from. About 1.6 million years ago, our mitochondria ancestor called Lucy in Ethiopia was the first hominin that could walk on her two legs. And this mitochondria ancestor trekked throughout the African continent and spread throughout the world. We are all a story of migration. Fast forward the 13th century, we have a place called Timbuktu in Mali, which was the center of Islamic learning at that time, that contributed to the trans-Saharan trade routes, as well as Islamic thought. Migration was a tool for academic progress in this world. Fast forward the history of colonialism that brought about a very negative regime. At that time, migration was used as a tool to bring about something that the world eventually didn't agree with. So we see that in history, migration has been a tool for human progress. migration has also been a tool to cause disinformation. So what does that mean for us? It means something really simple, that migration in of itself and the history of it is not just the history of migration, but the history of humanity itself. And as such, we must protect this legacy with truth and integrity. And in doing so, we must tackle the fundamental challenges that come with disinformation. Firstly, as has been mentioned by the previous panelists, the issue of xenophobia. In 2008 and 2012 as well, and 2022, the Southern African region experienced quite adverse xenophobic attacks in some member states. And that created a negative narrative for migration and was actually birthed from a negative narrative of migration. When the ordinary citizen looks at a migrant, the first thing that comes to mind is they want to steal our jobs, they want to take away our land, they want to grab our resources. This is a real reality. Over the past 3 weeks, I've been privileged to engage with quite a number of grassroots youth. I've been to Algeria, I was in Malawi, and I was in Kenya and Zambia. And engaging these young people will tell you that there is a lot of disinformation around migration. Aside from xenophobic sentiments, there is also lack of integration regionally. And when you look at the African state, I believe those of us who were here earlier in the first plenary session, I had mentioned to the DG that in Africa, for example, we have only 4 countries that have ratified the protocol that is supposed to integrate the continent. And the reason for this is because of lack of knowledge from member states, lack of commitment from member states. It is because of disinformation and misinformation. And lastly, I think one of the areas in which are impacted the most that reduces the ability of member states to ensure that regular pathways are facilitated is lack of citizen engagement. And this is something that cannot be overemphasized. Many countries speak from a top-down approach and not from a bottom-up approach. And this is why it is not a political priority, because at the end of the day, no matter what we do or say, the politician has to decide that migration has to be a priority. And this is when commitment will come. So it's a political decision. And guess what? What do politicians do when they make political decisions? They make decisions based on the citizen understanding and desire. If citizens are not pushing their politicians to ensure that decisions are made around migration, around disinformation, it will not happen. And how do we engage communities? How do we raise sensitization? It is through civil society organizations that have got 3 fundamental functions. Number 1, building state capacity. Number 2, building state responsiveness. And number 3, building state accountability. Once we engage civil society organizations, the issue of disinformation will be dealt with. Finally, I believe that when we are armed with facts, we will be instruments of understanding. And from disunity, we will be a united world. So thank you so much.
So, thank you very much, Walter. Very hard to comment on that, but thank you for reminding us that the history of migration is the history of humanity. I think that I want to stay with that. Of course, we have 2 more questions for our panel, and we have limited time, and we also want to have interactions from the audience and giving you the possibility to raise questions and comments to what these amazing people has bring to the conversation today. So I would like to merge the next 2 questions that we have to give you an opportunity to also address them together. The second question we had for you is if you could share what are some of the ways your organization or your country, in partnerships with others, and some of you have touched on this already, has overcome disinformation, and what solutions have had positive impacts on the ground for the communities. And the second question is, if you could share with us your insights on lessons learned and best practices for a multi-stakeholder partnership response, especially including private sectors, diasporas, migrants, and the media. So although some of you touched on it, perhaps now is the moment to give us a little bit more of insight on that. And again, I would like to start with Mrs. Medeiros from Brazil. Over to you, please.
Thank you again, Catalina. Well, as I mentioned in my previous intervention, Brazil in its law has the obligation to keep, in its migration law, it's important to say, we have the obligation to keep quantity and quality data on this topic. And to implement that, we have for now over 10 years a partnership with a federal university, University of Brasilia. And that partnership, it involves different organs of the federal government, including the National Statistics and Analytics Organization. What do we do? All the organs that produce any data related to migration, monthly, we send all that data to the university. And that data is analyzed, the statistic people do their work, which I do not know what it really is because I'm a lawyer, and we publish it. So the Brazilian state publishes monthly all their numbers on migration, and I've been told that's not very common, it's quite unique actually. As a consequence of that agreement, we also have been publishing for the last 8 or 7 years annual reports. We do a report in June analyzing all the refugee movements of the country, who arrived, which nationalities, on what numbers, and from where, in which point of Brazil they entered. And in December, we usually published the collective data on migration, going from visas issued to residency permits issued, and also Brazilians abroad. But we've noticed that's not enough. After 7, 8 years doing that, we thought, oh, maybe we are too focused on the people we already talked to, our academic bubble and our partners in the international organizations. So since last year, no, in 2023, we approved a law saying that the week around the 20th of June is the National Week for Migrants, Refugees, and Stateless People, and that week should be, in that week, the government should promote and disseminate information on that topic. So we have been now every year, we are in the 2nd year of that, doing a big event, calling everybody and to discuss that topic, which makes me both nervous and happy because it's a big event, but also we managed to talk to more people. And since this year, we also thought, what else can we do? So we started we updated our monthly reports. They're not only Excel sheets and stuff like that. Now we have a website called Data Migra BI, where we put all the information in a very nice way of dealing with. We also produce interactive dashboards and scoreboards so people can follow and customize their own research. And we have been doing Inform. We do publish a little document that I was actually about finalizing the revision right before this panel started, that we distribute among the people from the sector and all the government. And my colleague here, who spoke very beautifully, by the way, talked about citizen engagement. That's indeed very important for governments. But I like to say that's also important to promote government engagement, because I suppose in all governments there's migration is a very specific topic, and it's important that our partners within the government also know what's going on, and they see the real size and the real impact and real information about migration. So we have been working on that and talking more to our government friends, so everybody in Brazil is on the same level of information and on the same page about what we are doing. And I believe that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you very much, Luana, and thanks for raising not only the important efforts that Brazil is making in producing, collecting, and analyzing the data, but also the efforts to make that evidence accessible and usable formats and friendly formats, and the efforts on the Awareness Raising Week at national level, which I also believe are very relevant to these efforts to combat misinformation and disinformation. I would like then now to give the floor to Mr. Rajendra again, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you very much. As I already mentioned, some of the highlights of the partnership that Global Diaspora Organization, Nepali organization, is really working extensively to work with the destination countries as well as country of origin Nepal government and many of the private sector, bilateral agencies, multilateral agencies. Not only that, through the mobilization of volunteers, closely working in the major destination countries I already mentioned, in the Middle East countries, even in Europe, even in Malaysia. Because the migrant workers by themselves are also the workers, but they are working as a volunteer as well. This is the great examples that closely working with the diplomatic missions to awareness raising on the policies, with the recruitment agencies, even the Nepali Diaspora Organization, NRNA, working closely with the media, even the awareness raising on the digital literacy, even the financial literacy is very important for the remittances that we are talking about, but the proper utilization of remittance is also very important. That type of information is working through the NRNA, and the government of Nepal has enacted one policy about the social security schemes for the migrant workers, the contribution-based social security schemes that the migrant workers can be part of it, but there are still misinformation or disinformation. If you look at the inclusiveness of the participation is still not that much effective, so we are working with the SSF, the Ministry of Labor, Employment and Social Welfare. Similarly, just 2 to 3, I think 2 to 3 days earlier, this is the first in the history of a migrant, Nepali diaspora and the government of Nepal. One company has been established, $100 million project, dollar project. It's the 5% of the Nepali government contribution and the 95% contribution of the NRNs, means migrant workers can contribute on it. So it will call NRN Development Fund. So this type of collaboration that I already mentioned, that collaboration with the IM, especially on diaspora mapping, even the knowledge conventions and many other platforms that we are working together, especially success stories that NRNA had collaborated with IM, ILO and government of Nepal and the migrant workers through mobilization of the volunteers and during COVID-19, luckily I was the project manager during that time, and 28,000 Nepali migrant workers were benefited. So I have the copy of this report as well, and this was the great initiative that we were able to save the lives of the people through proper messaging, those who were stranded due to the COVID-19 in the destination countries that I already mentioned, in the Middle East and Malaysia especially, that was targeted. Apart from that, we are closely working the shifting of the migrant workers in the Europe, that we are also facing lots of challenges that we are working through the families of especially of the migrant workers for the awareness raising, and also government of Nepal for the proper self-decision making, self-inform about the choices and the opportunities. And also the returning migrant workers are another issue that we don't have to forget, that returning migrants has come up with the different knowledge and skills that they can also create opportunities for self-employment at the local level, that we're partnering, we're collaborating with the returning migrants workers as well at the different tiers of the government. So these are the greater opportunities that we're also working with UN agencies and bilateral agencies. Another issue that I need to highlight, the proper orientations, pre-departure for the students that are the major and other migrant workers. I would not say migrant workers, but for the regular pathways of the students are also another issues that IOM and NRNA is working together on the pre-departure orientation for the students targeted first to the Australia. That's the big number of the students are going to Australia. Based on that, government has also given the, opportunity to collaborate us. Based on the knowledge, we will definitely replicate that knowledge into the other countries. So I think providing better information, capacity building, these are the better practices, mobilization of the volunteers, investment opportunities. These are the various factors that NRNA has been collaborating with the different stakeholders. So we have lots of examples that we can highlight, we can say. So, and also we are part of the Global Diaspora Confederation, that we share learning in each other, and also the knowledge and skills conventions every 2 years. That's in 2023. IOM had also supported that. The diaspora experts and Nepali diaspora experts stay each other and they share knowledge and skills. So these are the different forums and opportunity that the Nepali diaspora is working around the world. And yeah, these are some of the initiatives of the partnerships and the success stories. And really appreciate for giving us opportunity to share this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raoult, also for bringing the important issue of the role of remittances, how we can also have good responses like the one that you gave as an example on the COVID response to save lives through sharing information, and also discussing on how to keep migrant workers informed about their social protection benefits and how to how this influences the mobility. So I would like now to give the floor back to Your Excellency, Mr. Mustafa Omer, please.
Thank you again. In my opening remarks, I mentioned that Ethiopia hosts close to 1 million migrants from neighboring East African countries and beyond. And regarding the disinformation related to migration, we don't have a big issue in terms of the migrants that Ethiopia hosts, because the narrations about migration are rooted in our long-standing history and culture of receiving guests. Therefore, rather than being seen as a problem, migrants coming to Ethiopia are seen as a blessing for the country. There are a lot of tales in different historical contexts of migrants coming to Ethiopia in search of better life and security. The most famous being the hijrah, the first hijrah of the Prophet Muhammad from Arabia and his companions to Ethiopia, where they were hosted. So because of that, we are not dealing as such in terms of disinformation regarding on migrants. But I think the bigger issue in Ethiopia nowadays is the impact of irregular migration to Europe and Arabia through very dangerous routes. And rightly so, most of the discussion has focused on dissuading the youth from going through this dangerous path. And therefore, yes, the media has been a critical partner with for the government in the last couple of years. A lot of songs, a lot of dramas, a lot of plays have been produced, mainly warning the youth of the dangers along the routes they choose, and also highlighting the opportunities at home that they can exploit. So on this information, I think the media has been a good partner, but the focus has been more on irregular migration. In terms of the bigger issues, I think it's also true for a country like Ethiopia with a large labor force and with high unemployment, particularly for the youth, who make up more than 65% or the labor force and of the country. The government have been trying to address the underlying causal factors as well, not only focusing on the dangers of irregular migration, but also understanding why people are going. And for that, I think it would be remiss if I don't mention the creation of a whole ministry for jobs and skills, the Ministry of Jobs and Skills, particularly focusing on skill development, job creation for the youth and women, and establishing systems, information systems for regular migration, as I mentioned earlier. This has been the steps that the government has been taking because we have understood the reality that migration will be there. It's a human phenomenon. It has been there, and it will continue. So regularizing it and ensuring that people come through the right path is what the government has focused on. And I think on the bigger discussion later on, focusing on both the disinformation for the receiving countries and also the impact of disinformation on the originating country will give us the full picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omer, for that important response, bringing again why we need to work with partners in sharing information and the role of media that I think it's important through drama, warning the youth of Ethiopia about the challenges and also the opportunities they have at home and the efforts that the government is undertaking to address the root causes of the departure of all these young people, including inequality, lack of employment, and the efforts to address those challenges. Walter, back to you.
Thank you so much. And I believe the question that you've asked is quite critical for our discussion here today. I think I would like to start by mentioning that we cannot deal with the issue of inclusion without dealing with the system that perpetuates seclusion. And I think this is something that we need to lean on the most, especially speaking as a young person. I think the issue of disinformation has already been clearly outlined, but as an IOM youth change maker, as an AU IOM youth ambassador, there are quite a number of initiatives that we have been able to participate in. I think, first of all, the Youth Changemaker program in of itself is perhaps, I'm envisioning it to be one of the most key drivers to IOM's agenda in regards to migration issues. We had IOM Youth Changemakers that represented global youth at the Summit for the Future. We had IOM Youth Changemakers represent global youth also at the just recently ended COP. So IOM has got an agenda for young people and putting them in front in regards to negotiation, in regards to advocacy, in regards to ensuring that we speak truth to power. But aside from just looking at it from the global level, the IOM AU Youth Ambassadors have also been at work. We have youth ambassadors who are, experts in migration, experts in climate and migration, experts in, conflict management, transitional justice and migration, diaspora engagement. We have, ambassadors who represent the MENA region, and myself who represents the Southern African region as an AU IOM ambassador. And part of the work that we do is ensuring that we are combating the issue of disinformation. We have, done some activities. I've collaborated with IOM Malawi. We did an activity as we were heading towards the Day of Trafficking in Persons just last July, where we built capacity. I headed an initiative that built capacity at a tertiary institution in Lilongwe, and we built capacity in regards to, prevention of child trafficking, early warning signs of child trafficking. We've done initiatives also in countries like Ethiopia, and I'm so glad that His Excellency has mentioned quite a number of things that the Ethiopian government is doing, Namsekanalo, which is thank you in Amharic. So we're glad we've engaged governments, we've engaged private sector, we've engaged civil society organizations as well. And perhaps maybe even just to conclude my statement, I would like to tell a little bit of a story. So a few months ago, we were in Ethiopia and we collaborated with, the African Union on a capacity building training on regional projects around free movement of people in Africa. And I met this young man. His name is Emmanuel. I recently met him again a few days ago. Now, when I met Emmanuel, he was a young budding writer who would always apply to write in essay competitions. So the African Union would issue out calls to write on different topics such as economic growth, topics such as, colonialism, topics such as what Africa needs, African culture. And after that session, he never really got opportunity. But after we built capacity in Emmanuel, he comes from Kenya, by the way. A few days ago, I met him in Kenya, and he told me, "Thank you so much, Mr. Walter." I never thought I would be called Mr. one day, but because he's a young man, you see. Yes, so he says, "Thank you, Mr. Walter. Actually, I'm here at the visa office, just getting my visa to go to Austria. I just was shortlisted for an essay competition I wrote on migration in Africa. So the information that you guys built in us was really helpful." And for me, such stories are what are critical. It's easy for us to tend to find these events a little bit too formal, and we lose touch of reality. Young people are being affected by the issue of migration. And also, young people are the most critical element in ensuring that migration discourse globally and also disinformation is dealt with. So we've done quite a number of work as IOM change makers, as also IOM ambassadors, and we fundamentally believe that the young people of the world are the enlightened and dynamic force upon whom the future and destiny of our world lies. And as such, it is important for us to prioritize them to deal with the issue of disinformation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much again for those words and for recognizing the efforts of the Youth Chainmaker program, that I believe it's a worth mentioned effort, and as you said, it's opening opportunities to bring the voices of the generation to the topics that really matter to them and to the global community. So thank you very much for all those insightful interventions. I think that before I say any more, I would like to give the floor back to Michelle so that she can help us to facilitate an interaction with the audience to see if you have any comments or reaction to this discussion before we come back to the panel. Michelle, please. I cannot think of a more stellar person.
Catalina, and I believe I see, yes, I do see a placard up from the representative of the Government of Canada. Stephanie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you so much, panelists, for your comments and sharing of your experiences, insights. Canada has been, of course, very interested in balanced narratives for many years. We've contributed to the Global Forum for Migration and Development. We've contributed to the IOM conversations here as well. And I have two questions based on your comments. My first question is if you can share any insights on how to balance detecting and correcting misinformation or disinformation, but in a way that doesn't risk actually highlighting or spotlighting it so that it gets worse. We know from social media, the more hits, the more eyes, the better, and how high it goes, the algorithms in terms of the various social media companies, that makes a difference. So how do you balance, or how do you determine when do you go in and correct? But of course, recognizing that risk. And of course, I was thinking and reflecting on Mrs. Minera's experience in Brazil in terms of being sensitive to public opinion. So how do you make sure that you're not playing into the hands of actually the opinion that you're not looking to support or to combat? And I think also, of course, the comments from His Excellency from Ethiopia in terms of how do you combat that disinformation. So first question. Second question. Any insights on who you would acknowledge as trusted voices, where even disinformation or misinformation is sensational and gets attention, but these trusted voices maintain their credibility, even if they're perhaps not voicing the popular opinion? And how do we, perhaps as multi-stakeholder partners, make sure those voices that have the trust, have the data, and also have perhaps the audience to which they can speak to and maintain that, I guess, message that there is another narrative, there is hopefully a more positive narrative than the disinformation and misinformation that we hear. And of course, those are also reflective of the challenges in Latin America at the Darien Gap. Canada is very concerned about the sort of which voices are being heard. And of course, I think research shows that smugglers' voices are being heard for many who are looking for information. But then where is that counteract? Where is that counterbalance? And how can various partners turn to those trusted voices to help in that situation? So thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, the Delegate of Canada, for those excellent questions. Okay, I have quite a few requests for the floor. I'm going to name out loud who has requested or who I see, and in the order. So next will be the Philippines, followed by Burkina Faso, the United Kingdom, United States, Ecuador, and the Holy See. Is there anybody that I've missed? Because I think we'll need to close the list at that point so that you can get to the Innovation Awards in time and the dancing that our Director General promised. So with that, let me turn now to the representative of the Philippines. You have the floor, Madam.
Madam Chair, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. This has been a very enriching day, and I congratulate IOM for the discussions and the wealth of knowledge that this day has generated. The Philippines recognizes that the internet and social media have become powerful tools in shaping migration narratives. While these platforms have the potential to promote accurate information and empower migrants, they are increasingly being misused to spread disinformation, thus fueling anti-migrant sentiments and undermining regular migration pathways. Addressing this challenge is essential to ensuring informed dialogue and effective migration governance. There is no silver bullet to combat disinformation, no one lever to pull to shift from the negative and focus people's attention on the positive aspects of migration. Realizing this and given our existing resources, the Philippines employs a multi-pronged approach. First, we enhance our digital outreach to our people. This speaks about the direct citizen government engagements, as our speakers have alluded to a while ago. The Department of Migrant Workers and the Commission on Filipinos Overseas and the Department of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines utilize online platforms and social media, which are widely accessed by Filipinos at home and abroad, and these serve as popular and vital channels for sharing accurate, engaging, and timely content about migration policies and services, as well as informing them of their rights and responsibilities within the migration cycle. When used responsibly and carefully, this tool can be used for transfer of knowledge and skills necessary for economic participation and social inclusion while minimizing vulnerabilities. Second, we do media literacy campaigns. To empower migrants and their families, the government, through the DMW and the CFO, collaborate with schools, NGOs, and community organizations to integrate media literacy into broader migration education efforts, with the objective to equip individuals with the skills to identify and counter disinformation, thus fostering a culture of critical thinking and increasing their resilience against harmful narratives. We also use online platforms in promoting financial literacy, such as the initiative on CFO's Peso Sense program, a free online financial education module that offers free on-site literacy training workshops to migrants and families of migrants left behind, and even the general public, encouraging the use of remittances for productive investments which contribute to local economic growth. Also, by supporting returning migrants to invest in their home communities, we also facilitate the transfer of skills, innovation, and resources, further contributing to national and local development. Incentivizing returning migrants to invest in their home communities creates a virtuous cycle of knowledge transfer and sustainable development. Third, we actively promote balanced narratives. We continue to actively highlight migration's positive contributions to global development while actively addressing domestic challenges such as brain drain or cases of exploitation of our people outside our country. By sharing evidence-based narratives, the Philippines hopes to counter harmful myths and reinforce the value of regular migration pathways in the multilateral fora. The Philippines is also an active member of the Global Diaspora Policy Alliance, highlighting the good brought about by migration through diaspora engagement. We support and foster multilateral discussions on positive and accurate migration narratives in other fora, such as the GFMT. On this, we note that collaborative efforts and a multi-stakeholder approach is necessary to achieve scalable solutions, like local to regional fact-checking networks and coordinated public information campaigns to combat disinformation effectively together. The internet is a double-edged sword in managing migration narratives. It can amplify disinformation, but when harnessed strategically, it can serve as a powerful tool to educate, to engage, and to empower migrants and societies. Countering disinformation is an urgent yet complex task. Success hinges on leaning on strategic partnerships with the private sector, engaging civil society, including migrants and diaspora communities, and collaborating with media organizations. By pooling these diverse resources and perspectives, it is possible to foster evidence-based discourse, dispel harmful myths, and influence narratives that support regular migration and its critical role in global development. The Philippines remains committed to leveraging technology, fostering regional and global partnerships, and safeguarding accurate migration narratives to uphold migrant rights. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for the very substantive and concrete actions that the government of the Philippines is taking. We all take note of what you're doing, and you're often the leader in the migration area. Thank you. Next, I'd like to turn to the representative from Burkina Faso. Sir, you have the floor.
Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier les organisateurs de l'OIM pour ce dialogue qui nous a permis vraiment d'avoir des informations assez pointues et pertinentes. Alors, sur la question de la désinformation, ce que j'ai appris en tant que responsable de la migration au niveau du Burkina Faso, c'est que quelquefois, il n'y a pas d'équilibre dans l'information. Et de la même manière que vous pouvez diffuser des informations officielles pour contrer la désinformation, ceux de l'autre côté aussi ont cette capacité de nuire à vos informations officielles. Et ce qui m'est arrivé à travers les différentes interventions et l'intervention de M. Walter, ce qui m'est arrivé, il faut replacer la migration dans son berceau initial. Il faut le relier à l'homme, à l'humain. Parce que chaque fois qu'on veut traiter un homme comme un moyen, non jamais comme une fin, en ce moment-là, il faut repartir vraiment à la source principielle même de la migration. Pour cela, on ne peut pas combattre la désinformation seulement en combattant les épiphénomènes. On voit la sensibilisation, on voit les informations grand public, mais cela ne suffit pas parce que je l'ai expérimenté au Burkina Faso, qu'en faisant cela, vous vous retrouvez avec des effets mitigés. Pour cela, je propose que tout simplement on puisse aller au fond, au niveau de l'éducation même des hommes, décoloniser l'esprit de tout un chacun, pour qu'ils puissent considérer l'humain en tant que tel comme une valeur absolue, non pas une valeur à relativiser avec la couleur de la peau, avec la race, avec quoi que ce soit, mais que l'homme demeure une valeur absolue dans tout ce qu'il est, dans son trajet, dans la trajectoire de toute sa vie. Merci bien.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur le représentant du pays de Burkina Faso. Vous avez raison. And now let me turn to the representative of the United Kingdom, followed by the representative of the United States. You have the word.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Mr. Vandas and to the panel for your contributions. It's been really interesting to hear all of your perspectives today, so thank you. As we face increasing global uncertainties and rising global...
Excuse me, could you speak a little closer to your microphone? It's hard to hear. Thank you.
Apologies, is that better? Okay, thanks. As we face increasing global uncertainties and rising global migration, we need to ensure that where migration is happening, it is safe, regular, and orderly. Tackling disinformation is a critical tool in minimizing irregular and dangerous journeys that carry so many risks. Early upstream communications are most effective in countering unsafe disinformation spread by organized migration crime networks and people smugglers. When messages are heard by migrants before their departure from their place of origin, they undermine the ability of criminals to promote illegal and dangerous services. This is why the UK government is running awareness campaigns in close cooperation with our partners in Albania and in Vietnam, highlighting the dangers of irregular journeys and the potential risks of exploitation. We also know that social media platforms can be exploited at scale to facilitate irregular migration, and it's vital that counter-messaging is targeted for these channels, as we've been discussing. The UK is working with social media companies to make it more difficult for gangs to use online messaging to advertise their services, so-called digital smuggling. As part of this work, we have set up an online communications centre that aims to remove illegal online content across social media platforms in multiple languages. Since the centre was launched in August, the time between a post being identified and removed has been reduced from 1 week to 48 hours, and takedown rates are at 98%. But there is more that can be done to close these channels, which is why the UK government will be publishing illegal content safety duties in spring 2025, which will require social media companies and search services to take robust and swift action against illegal content on their platforms, including organised immigration crime content. I will end by reiterating that where migration happens, we must work together at the international level to ensure that it is safe, regular and orderly. That is why sustained efforts to tackle disinformation that so often puts people in very difficult and dangerous circumstances are vital. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that quite substantive presentation. I think there'll be a lot of interest in your efforts to counteract the misinformation, both in terms of correcting it and taking action against companies. Thank you very much. Now the representative of the United States, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the moderators and panelists for this conversation. We've all seen that disinformation and misinformation about migration is ubiquitous, and we know it often leads migrants to undertake dangerous journeys. Messaging campaigns are key to sharing the realities and consequences of irregular migration with vulnerable migrants. For example, U.S. messaging campaigns share information on regular migration pathways and other local support options, and expose the dangers migrants face along irregular migration routes. These campaigns help migrants make informed decisions about spending significant resources and avoiding putting themselves and their families in harm's way. These targeted campaigns reach high out-migration communities and clarify U.S. immigration laws and border policy, combating misleading information spread by smuggling networks. Promoting a balanced narrative on migration, one that showcases the benefits migration brings to host communities, home communities, and migrants themselves, is essential to developing evidence-based policies at all levels of government. From a purely economic perspective, we know that major economies face a shortage of workers to fill 30 million jobs, leading to an annual loss of 1.3 trillion for businesses. This is something that DG Pope mentioned earlier today as well. At the same time, workers in other countries are seeking new opportunities for their families and communities. The U.S. Congressional Budget Office has projected that the increase in immigration will boost U.S. federal revenues by almost $1 trillion on net over the period between 2024 and 2034. We also know that despite concerns about a drain on resources and available services, the net fiscal contribution of migrants through taxes and other means is greater than the benefits they receive. Regularizing and thoroughly integrating migrants into receiving economies and labor markets is the best way to facilitate that positive impact and create firsthand knowledge of migrants' positive contributions. Creating comprehensive regular pathways is complex, but they can provide real solutions for individuals, communities, and businesses in both origin and destination countries. This requires collaboration with the whole range of partners: governments, international organizations, civil societies, multilateral development banks, private sector, diaspora, and academia and researchers, and importantly, and of course, the migrants themselves. The United States looks forward to continuing to work with these essential partners to develop and implement innovative ideas to drive forward a balanced, evidence-based narrative on migration. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very constructive contribution. Thank you very much to the United States. And now, la representante del país de Ecuador, usted tiene la palabra, señora.
Muchas gracias. Mi delegación agradece a la OIM por la organización de este diálogo y coincide en que la lucha contra la desinformación es una tarea fundamental para garantizar que las vías de migración regular se transformen en herramientas efectivas y soluciones sostenibles. Desde la perspectiva del Ecuador, como país de origen, tránsito y destino, que conoce de primera mano los desafíos y oportunidades de la movilidad humana, queremos destacar la importancia de combatir la desinformación, incluyendo a través del fortalecimiento de la comunicación y de la construcción de narrativas positivas que favorecen la inclusión, la cohesión social y la integración. Hoy enfrentamos una amenaza creciente, las campañas digitales de desinformación que distorsionan la realidad de la migración, siembran división y dificultan el diseño de políticas basadas en datos para construir soluciones inclusivas y sostenibles. El Ecuador aboga por un enfoque centrado en 4 prioridades esenciales. 1. Fortalecer las alianzas con el sector privado y los medios de comunicación para combatir activamente las campañas de desinformación mediante la promoción de mensajes equilibrados, inspirados en datos y testimonios reales de migrantes. 2. Alentar a los gobiernos locales y a las comunidades de acogida a que incorporen en el diseño e implementación de sus políticas públicas y programas narrativas que faciliten la comprensión de la contribución positiva de la migración y acciones contra cualquier acto de xenofobia o prácticas discriminatorias. 3. Involucrar a la sociedad civil, incluidas las comunidades de migrantes y diásporas, como actores claves para amplificar historias de éxito, resiliencia y contribuciones positivas, revirtiendo los prejuicios y destacando la riqueza de la diversidad. 4. Promover la investigación científica y la formación en alfabetización digital, asegurándonos de que las nuevas generaciones tengan herramientas para identificar y contrarrestar la desinformación. El Ecuador reafirma su compromiso con la migración segura, ordenada y regular como un eje estratégico para el desarrollo humano y las transiciones justas. Combatir la desinformación no es solo un desafío técnico, es un imperativo ético para construir sociedades más justas, inclusivas y resilientes. Hacemos un llamado para redoblar esfuerzos conjuntos en esta tarea. Juntos podemos transformar las narrativas migratorias, promoviendo un diálogo global basado en hechos, respeto y esperanza. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias a usted para estos 4 pilares importantes. Gracias por la sugerencia. And now let me give the final word from the floor to the representative of the Holy See. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Solomon. The delegation of the Holy See wishes to thank the panelists for their contribution to today's discussion. In a globalized world where people are increasingly on the move, whether it be for work or study purposes, or to search for a better life, also by escaping the effects of climate change, it is essential to develop regular pathways to determine where and how people migrate in a safe and orderly manner, while fully respecting the inherent dignity of each migrant. This is also a way to avoid the loss of lives when migrants undertake dangerous journeys, putting their lives at risk in the hands of human traffickers or smugglers. As Pope Francis has affirmed, in order to achieve safe and legal access routes for migrants, we need to promote a global governance of migration based on justice, brotherhood, and solidarity. This requires not only a more humane and fairer legislation, but also a balanced and objective narrative on migration based on facts, highlighting the benefits that migrants receive, as well as the unique richness that can stem from the encounter between different cultures. Indeed, while migration can generate suspicion and unease, it is also true that these sentiments are often exploited by those in power for personal gain. Starting with governments, but not stopping there, it is a collective responsibility of the whole of society to combat this toxic narrative. Listening to migrants and host countries' success stories and positive models of integration is fundamental to conveying a constructive narrative, to counter the cherry-picking and fragmentation of information that can spread rapidly on social media platforms, often exploited and manipulated for political purposes. There is a need for a balanced and neutral discussion on the dissemination of information and migration. One of the challenges in this area is to, quote-unquote, uncover the reality. In addition, communities have the duty to improve the quality of education within the family and the educational system of the next generations, making every possible effort to reduce the spread of hatred. It is evident that it is necessary to address the root causes of irregular migration and the conditions that give rise to it, In fact, the provision of safe places and adequate information leads to well-informed and conscious decisions to leave or not. Given the extensive role of the Catholic Church and related institutions in providing protection and assistance to people on the move, we would like to ask the distinguished panelists the following questions. How can we promote a more structured dialogue among states and other stakeholders along migration routes of origin, transit, and destination to present a more factual narrative? Do you have any practical suggestions to share? Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much to the distinguished representative of the Holy See. That's it from the floor. That was quite a round of very, very thoughtful and innovative contributions. Let me turn back to you, Catalina, to offer an opportunity, if you wish, to our panelists for quick responses to the questions that have been posed. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Michelle. Thank you very much. And indeed, thanks to all the audience for your comments and questions. And I will now briefly like to go back to the panel. We have very, very limited time, so I would like to have your final remarks. And if we want, we can swap and we can start with Walter this time.
Thank you so much. I think all the sentiments, all the words that have been spoken and the questions that have been asked by member states and also by cooperating partners are really key in us dealing with the issue of, disinformation. But I think to be a little bit more practical, I think we must not forget the real reason we are here, which is the migrants. And I would like to specifically talk about migrants that are in perhaps the worst humanitarian crisis right now. And it's not the one you're thinking about in your mind, the crisis in Sudan. The crisis in Sudan is also quote-unquote called the forgotten war. A lot of young people have been greatly affected by this crisis. A lot of member states that are surrounding Sudan are facing a crisis also in terms of facilitating the presence of migrants in those nations, hosting them. So we need more international cooperation in dealing with this particular issue. Firstly, in terms of negotiation in how that civil war is being handled, and also in terms of facilitating, regular pathways for refugees and also driving solutions to displacement. I think that is really key, and we cannot leave this place without dealing with that particular issue. I think secondly, what I would like to say is also we need to build bridges, and I think this one is a little bit controversial. We need to reach the other side of the aisle and have a conversation. I think it is only when we have conversations on, anti-migrant sentiments, honest, factual conversations, can we be able to get everyone on board in ensuring that we have the issue of disinformation dealt with. Thirdly, I'd like to talk about the program that I'm representing here, the IOM Youth Changemakers. These are global change makers. And this week we'll be having our launch. So I can see that member states are present here. Let us take time to invest and speak to the change makers. It's not only I that is present here. Other change makers will be on board, and we want to engage member states in ensuring how can we prioritize young people globally on the issue of disinformation. Fourthly, I'd like to talk about innovation. Innovation is also key. We need to innovate in our approach in dealing with disinformation. I think it's really important. I think one of the presenters on the floor had mentioned to say, how do we innovate? How do we get, those influential actors? I think it was the representative from Canada, if I'm not mistaken, trusted voices, right? So we need to innovate. We need to ensure that we're getting the superstars of this world as migration ambassadors to deal with this. And finally, we need to unite, and not in a homogeneous way where we are uniform, but celebrating unity in diversity. The doom of the migrant can only be averted by a storm of glowing passion. Thank you so much, and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I now would like to hear again from Your Excellency, Mr. Omer.
Thank you again, and I think it has been a refreshing discussion on the issue of migration and with a focus on disinformation. To combat that, I think data is a good starting point, but it may not be enough given the impact of social media, artificial intelligence, and very polarized political positions that usually inform our interpretations of data. Therefore, I think what's critical is not only to establish the right data, which is, of course, the necessary condition, but also to devise the right messages from the data, establish the facts, identify the strategies to rectify wrong narrations, and also identify the right stakeholders or the right actors to sell our messages. And in that regard, I think we can learn from successful advocacies we have done on different topics, climate being one, the combat against racism being another. I think we can follow the same templates which have worked by and large. I think on climate, engaging the youth to sell our narrations has helped, and I think the overwhelming perception globally is one that now endorses the scientific positions that we have on climate change. Equally on racism, the role of sport and celebrities has been very critical. On big events, messages have been passed. So our selection of the venues as well as the actors is really critical to ensure that our messages pass through. Therefore, this I think can help in terms of mitigating against the adverse impacts of disinformation on migration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omer. And now from NRNA, Mr. Raoud, please.
Madam, thank you so much. And I could hear lots of very important remarks from the delegates and also the panelists, the respected panelists. Thank you so much. Being global diaspora, I can see multi-sectoral initiatives or multi-sectoral collaboration is very important to combat such misinformation or disinformation. That we need to work with definitely the government, different tiers of the government, media, private sectors, civil societies, and also the diaspora community members and their families, migrant workers and their families. We don't have to forget the members, migrants and their families as well, who are the really very, always due to the disinformation and misinformation, they are the victims, or they are always in the risky population, I would say. And also need to develop the strategies that build trust and safeguard regular migration pathways if we work together. And also capacity building, creating platform and research, very important that we are talking about what kind of initiatives through the research that is very important to be discussed. And also the awareness raising about identification and mitigation, measures on disinformation and misinformation, definitely digital literacy to check the fact and to find the accurate content, and also the information, such information can help to foster reliable information on regular migration pathways. The policies, very important, like transparent, accountable, and inclusive migration policies, and result-based bilateral labor migrant agreements, and also the MOUs, very important to combat such the vulnerability for the regular migration pathways. And finally, that we all are the member nations, that the concerned stakeholders, that we definitely need to look into the SDG 8, that is decent work and economic growth, by ensuring safe migration pathways, that we will be able to achieve the expected results of that SDG indicators. Role of diaspora is really important that we are talking about on this session. And NRNA as a non-resident Nepali association, as a part of the global diaspora, Nepali diaspora organization, is pleased to work with the multi-sectoral stakeholders to combat on such risk or vulnerability through the misinformation or disinformation. So it is the prime need of working together on this issue. And On behalf of NRNA and myself, I would like to thank IOM for inviting us on this really important mission, and we're always very happy to work together, and thank you so much for giving me a chance in the final remarks. Thank you. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much for bringing your insights to this panel. And now, last but not least, Madam Luana Medeiros, please.
Well, I'll try to be brief. I think answering the question for the colleague from Canada, I think that's learning how to tackle and manage combating, correcting, but not highlighting in a social media everyday changing worlds. It's a very big challenge for governments, which are by tradition very stiff organizations and move very slow. And we are also trying to figure out how to do it. And we just newly created a digital rights secretariat in the Ministry of Justice with the job to coordinate all that and everything that goes around that topic. To be very brief, I would just like to highlight two tools that I believe could help us with that. One is the International Partnership for Information and Democracy, championed by France, which Brazil supports, which was created to respond the need to promote an environment that conducive to reliable information for citizens in order to enable them to forge an informed opinion in a context where large-scale online misinformation is, well, bubbling, sapping trust, that I just read from the government of France website. So, and another tool is the very newly approved Global Compact, Global Digital Compact, that was approved now in September, and the UN General Assembly that we hope can help all of us shape a safe future for all of us in that everyday changing world of digital information. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Medeiros. And with that, I have to thank you again to our panelists for the really insightful comments and contributions, to the audience for your interest and engagement. We cannot stress enough the importance of the issue of information and misinformation in this current landscape, and how we need to work, as suggested, in unity and broad partnerships with all the different sectors in bringing solutions that can be replicated at the local, national, regional, and global levels based on evidence and on the good practices and examples that we have. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor back to our stellar Master of Ceremonies, Michelle, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Catalina. And all that's left for me to do with respect to this panel is to invite the audience to join me in thanking Catalina and these fantastic panelists. You have provided excellent, excellent insights. And thanks to all of you for your comments. Bravo. Bravo. Thank you all very much. And look forward to seeing you at the reception after we have the closing section now, closing session, and I invite Deputy Director General Ugochi Daniels to join me on the podium for our closing session. I am happy to welcome to the podium IOM's Deputy Director General for Operations, Ms. Ugochi Daniels, my friend and former boss. It's great to have you up here. This is the closing session, and I'm going to offer a couple of closing remarks that were gathered by the team drawing out what several of the panelists said, some comments from the floor, and I will do my very best to keep it brief, and then hand the floor over to Ugo to finalize this. And then we are committed to being on time and finishing by 5:30 to then welcome you to the IOM Innovation Awards. So with that, let me take you first say, I would like to express on behalf of IOM our most sincere gratitude. I'm still saying we. I retired at the end of August, but I'm still we for the time being. So really, most sincere gratitude to all of this distinguished speakers, to all of you in the room, all the moderators for your active, expert, thought-provoking, and concrete interventions. Thank you so much. You've helped us enormously in stimulating a substantive debate, offering new ideas, and really setting a pathway forward. So thank you very much. As you know, this was the second of two sessions of the International Dialogue on Migration. The first year of the one this year was held in New York in May. This is the second. It's a great honor for IOM to be able to offer the International Dialogue on Migration, both in New York for the delegates there and here. And this one built on the outcomes of the last one. It doesn't repeat what was said there, but actually goes deeper on some of the issues and raise new issues, in particular, the green transition and what we just talked about with respect to the narrative and combating misinformation and how important that is to promoting regular pathways. Let me remind you of a few comments from Director General Pope in her opening remarks. She invited all of us to celebrate the wonder, the beauty, and the promise of migration, and to explore how to harness its benefits. By doing so in an orderly manner. And this was underscored by so many of you throughout the day, making sure that migration is safe, humane, orderly, and regular. That's a smart and strategic way to approach migration, which means we also have to work on combating irregular migration, which brings great risk to individuals and undermines confidence in societies about the ability to manage migration. She also reminded us that we know of the many drivers of migration today and the complexity of those. And she pointed in particular to climate change now becoming an increasingly important driver of migration, both internally within countries and increasingly across borders. She lamented the more than 8,000 migrant deaths that took place over the course of the past year. That is truly cause for great concern, and it shocks the conscience and breaks our heart. You know, IOM has the Missing Migrants Project. We try to track as best we can, together with many civil society and media organizations, what happens along routes. And these numbers, we know, are gross underestimate because too many people disappear without us being able to see. Let's honor them and their journeys, and let's work to make sure that this doesn't keep happening. She also raised the critical intersection between migration, displacement, and labor market needs, and the need to curb abuses of the current system. There's a need to recalibrate migration policy to what are emerging great labor market needs. The delegate of the United States referred to the statistic, to the citation that the Director General cited. That comes from a study that IOM did together with the Boston Consulting Group, which showed that the 30 largest developed economies are losing 1.3 million people a day, and 13 trillion, wait, what, give me the numbers, Sorry, I had them in my head a moment ago and lost them now.
30 million vacant jobs.
30 million vacant jobs in the top 30 OECD countries.
Costing 1.3 trillion.
She's a good ventriloquist per year. and foreseen to cost, and I know this one, $20 trillion by 2030 if it's not rectified. And that's because of demographic changes, where you have in the developed world aging and shrinking populations. Families are having fewer children, people are living longer, and there is a fundamental need for more workers. That's also stands in marked contrast to the youthful populations in Africa in particular and in other parts of the world where there are more people entering the economy without adequate jobs. There's an obvious win-win if we can get the politics and the policies of this right. So this is what Director General was calling on us to do, is to bring together that analysis of the growing labor market demands, the demographic shift that's producing this, and the shortage analysis together with where there are actually people who might be interested and have the skills to migrate. And do it in a concrete way with skills gaps analysis, with skills training to meet actual needs. And she pointed to some promising examples. For example, between Bangladesh and Germany, the agreement between Australia and Tuvalu, and the work undertaken by Cabo Verde on diaspora engagement. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. A couple of key points from the Setting the Scene presentation, where we heard from Ian Golden of Oxford University and Jibril Fall, one of the leading voices on migration. And they underscored together that regular pathways are absolutely essential for delivering on the promise of migration and to have migration contribute to development. They both see migration through a development lens, and regular migration is the kind of migration that best produces good development outcomes, not only for individuals, but for countries of origin and destination. They noted, and the DG talked about her travel together with other IOM senior leadership to more than 65 countries this year alone, and seeing how saving lives is a critical priority. Remember IOM's three-point strategy. But equally important, and driving solutions to displacement, equally important is creating adequate legal pathways. And that is also necessary to disincentivize irregular pathways. And several of you spoke from the floor noting that when there are legal pathways, regular pathways for migration, people opt for them rather than taking irregular. Now that happens in particular contexts, but we need to make sure it happens much more often. Private sector plays a critical role, not only as a contributor to relief, et cetera, but also as employers in this area. Migration is at the heart of development and global civilization. That was said in the opening, and Walter said it again in the most beautiful sentence, I think, from this whole day. As he said, migration is the history of mankind. The story of migration is the story of mankind. Thank you. You're absolutely right. And migration is a source of innovation and development for societies. And we need to foster the more pathways for migration, empower diaspora more effectively, not only because of the remittances they send, but because of the skills and the knowledge that they transfer and the development that they help incentivize back in their home communities. We need balanced strategies. We've seen, I'm going to jump ahead to the Bolstering Sustainable Development panel. And again, diaspora engagement remains critical, and it shouldn't just see this through the remittance lens. It's the knowledge transfer, it's the skills, it's the investment potential that in addition to just the raw remittances make a huge difference. The EU's new Migration and Asylum Pact has promising measures on promoting regular pathways, and there's concrete steps being taken by the EU as a collective and by its member states to really promote more regular pathways, while at the same time working to combat irregular migration. The Regional Conference on Migration for the 11 countries in Central and North America have an online migrant protection and resources and seminars for child protection and disaster management, amongst others. These are very concrete tools that can both promote the benefits of migration and help to reduce the negative impacts. Local governments are absolutely key, and we heard a very impassioned plea from the representative of the Union of Local Governments, UGL. Thank you. She's my ventriloquist, UCLG. Look what happens when you get out of it for 2 months. UCLG, absolutely, local governments are essential, but what she said to us, that they are not systematically included at the table in developing policy. And she challenged all of us to rectify that, because local governments are the ones who are at the fine point of addressing migration. That's where migrants live and flourish or not, depending on the policies, the capacities, the resources, and they must be at the table. So too must youth and employers and diaspora communities and all. And this is relevant at the global, national, and local levels. We need multi-stakeholder coalitions, including civil society, migrants, and diasporas themselves. Next, moving to catalyzing the just transition and supporting the green economy. This is quite an innovative panel that first focused on the Conference of the Parties, on climate change, and the very important gains in securing language on migration and displacement in the just transition, not only in the loss and damage provisions. This is great news, and it's going to stay thanks to the efforts of, amongst others, the government of Colombia and my colleagues at IOM and others. Thank you so much. This is an important development. But this panel also looked at how migrants can and must actually contribute to the green transition. Migrants work in critical sectors that are going to be part of this green transition and need to be factored in from the outset, in planning, in constructing housing, in transitioning energy, in all of these areas. So there's key challenges and key opportunities. Next, we heard from a very interesting collaborative I'm forgetting the name. Made in Italy, the thank you, the Farmers Alliance, showing how actually rural to urban migration is greater than all other forms of migration, and that we need to reduce, create incentives that make it possible for people to stay in rural areas, but also create incentives to break down the barriers to effective participation. Local solutions are critical. And then finally, our last panel, which I found particularly stimulating, was on combating disinformation to enable the realization of regular pathways. And I think this is critical from two key perspectives I gleaned from the presentations and from the many comments from the audience. First, migrants are at risk with misinformation. They are subject to misinformation by smugglers and traffickers who actually exploit them and not only steal from them, but commit violence, and in many cases, actually, they lose their lives. But it's also important because governance depends on good information. And when you have misinformation that fuels more irregular migration, and then it leads to societies feeling that governments are not in control of migration, it is very politically difficult to open up more regular migration pathways. And so for good policy making on migration, we need to have good information and the ability of governments to base their policies on regular pathways and reducing the incidence of irregular migration. So critical from both of those perspectives. I know that doesn't do justice at all to all the wonderful presentations and all of your comments, but let me wrap up there and hand the floor back to Deputy Director General Ugochi Daniels, and thank you all for your engagement and participation today. You were great.
I'm losing my words.
Showing my age or jet lag.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, it's such a pleasure and honor to close this second session of the International Dialogue on Migration 2024 with sincere gratitude to all of you. So I'd like to start off with a round of applause, first for our amazing Master of Ceremonies, our friend, Michelle Klein-Solomon, for the amazing panelists, great discussion, as well as the really insightful interventions from all of you on the floor, as well as for all of you who have stayed with us till the very end. Also a round of applause. And of course, it's with many thanks to all of you here today that IOM's International Dialogue on Migration continues to play such a critical role in fostering discussion on migration, as well as, very importantly, advancing effective solutions to ensure migration remains a driving force of development for migrants, the migration dividend that we heard about earlier today, the communities they come from and the communities they live in. It's central to IOM's commitment in supporting achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and, of course, implementing the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Thanks to you, the IDM is a testament of the transformative power of dialogue, where diverse perspective, expertise, experience, best practices, and innovative solutions can be brought together for collective and informed action. We know, we've heard today that safe, orderly, and regular migration is a global strategic asset, a force for prosperity, and progress for all as a driver of human development around our world. It's our individual as well as our collective responsibility to ensure a holistic and integrated approach to migration governance and cooperation that can be used for the greater good, including in the context of the challenges our world faces, whether it's conflicts, disasters, or fragility in our economic systems. So this was a clear message from the first session today, and which Michelle has already talked about. We know that facilitating regular migration pathways while addressing key challenges associated with this is essential for bolstering sustainable development. We heard about the outsized role that migrants play, and I don't have to go into all of the data because it's been reiterated many times today, but in summary, that migration is a global public good, and facilitating it through a comprehensive and balanced approach is at the heart of this positive migration and development story we witness in so many places around the world. And for me, it's a bit of a, what's the word? A really profound moment. Many of you have heard my personal story as a migrant woman who left Nigeria during the Civil War with my family, grew up in Sweden, in the US, in Canada. Fast forward, I'm the Deputy Director General for Operations at IOM, about to come up and give closing remarks. And I was speaking with one of the panelists from the last session, Ms. Medeiros, who you all listen to and who you all know is from Brazil. But what I'm sure you don't know is that Medeiros is also a very popular name in Nigeria because of the Brazilian slaves who returned to Nigeria and founded our capital. We call it Lagos, but all the Portuguese-speaking people I speak to call it Lagos. I mean, that is the power of migration. Yes, as Walter said, migration is the history of human civilization, but it's the story now, and it's the story of our future, our collective future. And as we understand from the commitments coming out of COP, it's essential to ensure that strategic pathways are in place for creating jobs that support the just transition and green economies. It's not the just transition, the green transition, blue economies. It's not going to happen without migration and achieving the migration bargain that we heard mentioned earlier this morning. If the world is really going to reap the global, the migration dividend. And so, Excellencies, dear friends, opportunities lie ahead of us, but to effectively seize them, we also need to recognize the challenges, one of which is misinformation and disinformation, which the panel spoke about. And I just want to highlight that the World Economic Forum Global Risks Report for this year says that the biggest short-term risk to the world is misinformation and disinformation. In the longer term, climate-related threats are the top risk the world faces. And the global experts who prepare this report anticipate a fragmented, multipolar global order is what we will have to deal with over the next few decades. This makes our dialogue today more important, more relevant, and more urgent than ever. So, as partnerships start with open dialogue, I'm very pleased that so many of you came, stayed, shared your wealth of experience from so many different backgrounds. And I hope, like me, you are all optimistic, hopeful, determined that through our collective action, we will ensure that migration is a global public good, migration is part of the solution, and that migration is at the heart of our future. So I'm going to close the way I started with a round of applause for the army of colleagues in the room, in the office, in the hall, who have made it possible for all of us to be here and to enjoy great services, sandwiches for lunch, obviously the great display outside, as well as the innovation awards that I am going to hand back to Michelle to invite you to. But please join me in really celebrating our truly great colleagues at IOM. And with that, I hand back to my dear friend, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Hugo, and my a special thanks to our colleagues, the many, many colleagues who work so hard to make today possible. So, and thank you, Hugo, for your fantastic concluding remarks. We are not quite done, but we are done in this room, so you get to get up. We have something exciting for you. I think, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first time that we are holding IOM's Innovation Awards in a public way. We have hosted them for the last 2 years, but only internally within IOM. And the ceremonies were so much fun and highlighted such interesting innovations that the team felt we shouldn't just keep it internally within IOM, we should share it with you, our membership, our stakeholders. So I can promise you that this is going to be interesting and exciting, and as Director General Pope said this morning, you'll be dancing over there. So if you could join me right away. We're going to walk out here. You're going to go back to where you went for the lunchtime break, and hopefully you will have noticed that there's a small stage. And at that small stage, I'll meet you, and we'll get started in introducing the Innovation Awards. Thank you all. See you over there.